Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 264. Thanks so much for joining us. Today's guest, Philip Metris, will be here in about 10 minutes. But before we begin, I should say that Rattle's a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995, and we are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do all this because we love poetry, and I know you do too, so please do click on the like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell for notifications. Whatever you could do to help poetry spread around the internet would be much appreciated. Now, it's great to be back. We had to have a week off. As you probably know, last week's guest, Eric Coker, was struck really toughly by the Hurricane Helene, and had no power. And hopefully everybody out there, who's gone through that tragedy is starting to get their lives back together with such a difficult situation going on. We're gonna have Eric back in December. But we're going to move on and looking forward to a new show today. Now, because we missed last week, we didn't have last week's Poets Respond poet on. And so I wanted to start out with Joshua Sinclair, who had a wonderful haiku. And here he is, Joshua. Hey, Josh, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, it's great to have you on. Thanks so much for being here. So I know it's been a week, but can you tell us what inspired this haiku?
Sure. So I had read a news article about Ukrainian President Zelensky visiting a munitions factory in Pennsylvania with my governor, and there was a famous image of my governor, Governor Shapiro, and he is grinning, and signing some munitions that were destined for the war, and you know that image really stuck with me all week, and I kept turning it over. And right before I wrote the poem, and I put my kids to bed, and I was in bed, and I was turning this thing over in my head, and I got the haiku from it.
Yeah. Well, it's only, I think, the third or fourth haiku we've done for Poets Respond in the 10 years we've been doing it. And so, it's always interesting to think about how much craft goes into a haiku. So is this something that you thought about as a broader poem, or did you know immediately there was going to be a haiku?
Well, most of my stuff is haiku, so I'd say it's my predominant form of writing. And many times when I'm creating something, or and when something's going through my head, haiku come out of my head, and
Mm-hmm.
it's one thing, and there's an association with another thing, and often they're disparate because haiku is all about juxtaposition. So
Mm-hmm.
looking at this, I wasn't necessarily setting out to write a haiku, but I had a thought. So I was thinking about this, and I was turning over this image of this grinning politician signing munition, and I was thinking about, I just put my kids to bed, and this bomb's going to go blow someone else's kid up, and maybe everything's going to continue to escalate, and my kids are going to be sent to war. And it's those horrors they kept pouring over, and I tend not to be someone that worries a lot, and I tend not to be someone that gets stuck on things, but I was sure stuck on this, and um, sort of unbidden, this image, this memory of this painting Guernica came to my head, and um, that was it. So I hadn't set out to write a poem. I just had a thought and wrote it down. That was it. Very, I wouldn't say that it came as something I was sitting and crafting, but it's something that very much came sort of unbidden and reacting to the news.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's hear it now.
Sure. His smile as he signs the bomb, Guernica.
Yeah, yeah, that's just such a powerful haiku, and the transition. There's such a leap from going to his smile. Every different line is a leap to something new, adding onto it, and then getting to Guernica at the end. Is such a powerful thing, and an image really. One of the things a haiku is this instantaneous combination of things that make you think and emote, and it does such a good job of it. So thanks so much for sharing that poem, which hopefully people take to heart. It's a beautiful one.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, and that was Joshua Sinclair. That was last week's Poets Respond poet. And now today's Poets Respond poet. So we got a jam-packed show, I should have said, too, because we have three Poets Respond poets we're going to share. Today's poet, Christiana, is not going to be here until later. So in the second half, she's going to come on. She has a prior engagement right now. But we had an extra poem this week because there were so many poems coming in. And I wanted to share one about this story, too. And so Frances Klein's going to join us. She's going to be our Tuesday poet on Rattle.com. And she had another poem about a story that's been going around this week. So hi, Frances. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. So what can you tell us about what you wrote about? This is a story that I saw and a lot of people were talking about on social media, in the poetry crowd. And so what was it?
So I wrote about an Atlantic article called "The Elite College Students Who Can't Read Books." And there was just, like you said, a lot of social media conversation about this idea that kids are going into colleges, even elite colleges, having never really read or been asked to read entire books. And lots of conversation about it, lots of argument back and forth. Um, you know, some people kind of very worked up about the idea that, because in the article, the kind of the villain identified as high school teachers who are not making kids read full books. And I am a high school teacher myself, so I can say that there's a lot of other factors that go into that. It's not as simple as um, maybe the article makes it out to be, but I have been teaching high school creative writing for a really long time. And one of the things that I've seen in the past few years is that kids come in and they say that they want to be writers, but they don't like reading. And they struggle to identify works of writing that they like or that they relate to, and their inspirations instead are TV shows or music. And so just kind of seeing, a lot of push pull for myself with that article, but there were some parts of it that I definitely related to.
Yeah, well, to anybody who loves literature and poetry in particular, but really anything, it's frightening to think about how much that reading has gone down just in general, and even myself. I read a book of poetry every week at least, but I can't remember the last time I read a full length book of prose, fiction. Maybe I don't even remember what the last one was. It's been a few years, I think. It's just frightening to think that reading has gone down that much, especially in younger people. Where when I was a kid, I was reading voraciously and loved it so much. And but anyway, let's take a look at this poem. Why don't you read it for everybody?
Yeah. So the poem that I wrote is called "When My Student Who Wants to Be a Writer Says They Do Not Read." Why would you build a house with no nails? Why plant, till, harvest a crop in whose taste you find no savor? The bees of the field scan the dances of their sisters before penning a path to the lavender patch. The forest produces a new body of work only after absorbing volumes of cedar trees, each bare bread and blueberry bush in the Tongass standing on the shoulders of giants. The incoming waves read each stone and shell on the shore as they sketch the high tide line. Inside you is a curled fern yearning for light. Inside you is a fire lit beneath a capped chimney. Smoke fills your rooms. There are no doors or windows to air them out.
And that was Frances Klein reading Tuesday's poem from Rattle.com, coming up, When My Student Who Wants to Be a Writer Says They Do Not Read. And you mentioned, Frances, that you don't think it's the teacher's fault. So, I was thinking about that a lot too. One of the things I found recently, my son is in 5th grade, and in his class, there are 4 kids reading at a 12th grade level, according to the standardized test. And then the majority of kids are below their 5th grade level, and the disparity between kids who love to read and the kids who don't is just massive. So what do you think, where do you put the blame, as it were?
Yeah, you actually said the word. You said standardized tests, right? It really is. There's this huge push for testing, especially in reading, which is one of the heavyweight tested subjects. And the push to perform well on standardized testing means that teachers are really restricted from teaching whole books because there's not enough time, right? Because they're not going to be tested on a whole book on a standardized test. So there's really this push to just give kids portions of books or to just give them passages, nonfiction passages especially. And so having taught, this tested subject in 9th and 10th grade especially, which is the big tested year, there really is this push to kind of chop up works of literature, unfortunately, because there's this idea that there's not enough time.
Yeah, well, that's really incredible, that's something I hadn't heard of at all. And coming from a teacher, it makes total sense that that's what would happen given the standardized testing. So really interesting to hear that, and hope it's something that gets corrected, because reading, that deeper reading where you get absorbed completely in a text, is something that is so valuable, and so we hate to lose that for future generations. So thanks for sharing this poem and doing what you do, Frances.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was Francis Klein again. That was going to be a poem coming up on Tuesday when it comes out. Do make it go viral. Share it a lot when it comes out on Tuesday. It was Francis Klein with my student who wants to be a writer says they do not read. And now we're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest. So sit tight and we will be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Like I said, today's guest is Philip Metris. Philip is the author of 12 books, including Fugitive, Refuge, which just came out from Copper Canyon Press, Shrapnel Maps, and The Sound of Listening, Poetry as Refuge and Resistance. His poetry, translation, essays, fiction, criticism, and scholarship has generated fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the Lannan Foundation, the NEA, the Ohio Arts Council, and the Watson Foundation. He's a recipient of the Adrienne Rich Award, 3 Arab American Book Awards, the Lyric Poetry Prize, a Pushcart Prize, and the Cleveland Arts Prize. He's a professor of English and the director of the Peace, Justice, and Human Rights program at John Carroll University. He lives with his family in Cleveland, Ohio. And here he is, Philip Metris. Hey, Philip, how you doing?
Hey Tim, it's great to join you tonight.
Yeah, it's so great to have you on. I've always been a fan of your work, and this book is really unique. It's an interesting dive into family history, and the movements of peoples, and really wonderful stuff you've included in it. So I'm looking forward to jumping in and sharing this work.
Oh, totally. Thanks so much. Yeah, I mean, it's really a book that's weaving those two things together. Kind of the general question of global human migration, and then also my own family story, which was hauntingly echoed in some of the images that I'd been seeing in the news and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's jump in with a poem.
Super. So I think we were landing on the opening poem of the book. It's called Plague Psalm 40. And for those of you who know your Hebrew Psalms, you may hear some echoes. This was written during the lockdown period of the pandemic. Plague Psalm 40. I wait in the waiting room of my room for you, dear doctor, to lean down and listen to the weird music in my chest. Draw me out of the mire of terminal detention, renewable distress. I'm surrounded, suffocated inside a gated state. The wind scribbles invitations, only tethered branches answer. Maestro, steady my starlings. For you I hunger. Lift your baton and stuff my mouth with singing.
Yeah, and that was Plague Psalm 40. And it's a section from Casita for the End of Time. And it's an interesting format. Can you tell us about what that is? Because the book sort of feels like it has that whole structure too. So what is a Casita?
Yeah, Qasida is an ancient Arabic form. It dates from the 7th century or so. It's usually a tripartite poem. The first section of which, now tell me if this doesn't sound very contemporary. The first section of which includes the poet happening upon the ruins of an encampment of his beloved. So it begins with loss, absence, and longing, and in some sense exile. Obviously at that period, Arab poetry was very much influenced by its place, by the movement of people across lands and sands. And so that's the first section, is this sort of like recognition of happening upon a place where someone that you longed for was recently around. So we could imagine this in a contemporary context, could be, oh, I don't know, anything, the baseball field where you made out with your girlfriend or whatever it is, right? And that's the first section. The second section is this the movement of the poet in outside of the familiar space and safety of his area, his tribe. And the last section is some kind of a return. So it's a really interesting poem of journey, of searching, and of return. And that, reading about the Qasida form was enormously inspiring to me. A great poet named Khalid Matawa, who is a Libyan American poet, had written a number in his book that came out in 2020, and I really liked how he was handling that form and that material. But if you look at the tradition, you'll see also poets like Lorca wrote some qasidas, but he writes of Casida. Um, but it's sort of like a mythic kind of structure that seems so familiar to us, as like almost a hero's journey type structure. So I was just really fascinated by that. And then as I was becoming more and more maniacal about the architecture of the book, I said, well, this whole thing could be sort of a single qasida, the first section of which would be these poems of sort of longing and detachment, and then sort of encountering the difficulties of the world, and then some attempt to sort of return and find home. So that's the way it more or less works.
Yeah. So do you know the structure of where you were going? Like once you heard of that form and we're thinking about that, did you know where you were going to go with this book?
Not at all. I mean, I think one of the fun things about putting together a collection is not really knowing what's happening and how it's going to all take shape. But I think what happens to me is, I always think of a book as, as I think it was supposed to have been Frost, but I think that's apocryphal that, the book is a sort of the 25th poem of the 24 of a collection. That I wanted to find some way of having the work speak to each other in more direct and intentional ways. And once started to think a little bit more about that form, it sort of gave me a container for what was previously really just totally disparate poems. And then maybe I wrote some more poems to kind of figure out, to fill out maybe some of those sections a little bit more. So.
Yeah, well, it's such a cool structure for a book, and then so many things come in with your family history and all the documents and images that you bring into it too. So it's really fascinating to read. Do you want to read the next poem? Do you want to do "The Arab Crosses into Los Estados Unidos"?
Sure. Let's see. Page
22.
Thanks. Yeah. All right. One of the things that happened during the pandemic lockdown was obviously we weren't traveling. So I started even before then, but I'd really formalized a desire to tell some family history and to do some research around that family history, and then to tell it to my family. And so one of the fruits of that research and that telling family stories to my wider family was stuff that ended up in the book. It's not as voluminous as my research was, but I tried to distill it down to some of the most salient points. So this poem concerns, it's from the point of view of my grandfather, who was exiled from Lebanon when he was quite young, and then who fled Mexico after his father was murdered. And this is a family story that was barely told at all in our family. But I had heard that my grandfather, Iskandar, was a very strong man, very powerful man, and the kind of mythologized person that you can imagine would be one who was lost too soon. So The only other thing I would want to say about this poem is that my grandfather was a very hard man, but as I started looking at the photos of him when he was a younger man, I could see just what a sensitive person he was. You looked at somebody's eyes in an old photo and you could tell that that person is someone for whom life can be too much. So I was just thinking about that as this poem took shape. So it's called The Arab Crosses into Los Estados Unidos. Once I bathed in new phrases, spoke with the star throat, silked in sentences, curled inside the parentheses of dream. Once my father bent a dime between his index and his thumb, snapped a house from air, swallowed gold fire, captured in singing glass. Glass sang from his circling touch. But when they came for him, he danced to their orchestra of bullets. We did not wait to tuck him safely into earth, raise his name in stone. What we buried beneath our ribs. At the border of the country of the future, I own nevers, dusty keys with no receiver. I carry him and cross the river.
Yeah, beautiful poem. That is The Arab Crosses into Los Estados Unidos. Again, from Fugitive, Refuge by Philip Metris, his newest book. So the book, chronicles, the journey, through that Quesada form that you were talking about. And so what can you get the scope of your family's journey reading the book, but since we have a few poems to work with, can you give us an overarching the sense of the story so we can access it better?
Sure, sure. I just want to say one thing about this poem before we let it go, which is that this poem began as a kind of a funny, not a funny, but a playful homage to Langston Hughes's well-known poem, The Negro Speaks of Rivers.
Mm-hmm.
And I was literally kind of like just riffing off some of the lines. And so the only one that you can see that remains, well, I think once I bathe in new phrases, there's a line like that, we bathe in the dawns or something like that. But the ending is, I own rivers, ancient dusky rivers. And here it becomes, I own nevers, like this sense of dispossession, not like this almost grand ownership of all that which we cannot own. This is a kind of inversion of that. So the family story is that my great-grandfather Skandar had been working for the Ottoman Empire around the turn of the last century and in Lebanon. And he fell afoul of the authorities. There's a poem story that I wrote about it in my first book called The Ballad of Skandar. And it's such a strange story. The nutshell of it is that he captured a Muslim man, who was apparently diverting a local stream from a village that people were relying on for water. But in the process of bringing this Muslim man to justice, the locals decided to take justice into their own hands and started firing at him. And my great-grandfather was shot and by mistake, and but the Muslim man kind of helped him in that time of need, and so my great-grandfather let him go. And when the Ottomans heard about this, of course, they imprisoned him, and my uh, Iskandar's wife had to sort of plea for his release. They said, well, he can leave, but you have to leave the country. You have to get out of here. So they moved to Mexico. There they found a life in a small port town that was just growing called Salina Cruz, which is in Oaxaca in the south west of Mexico. And like many immigrants, they plied their trade. I don't actually know how he started, but he ended up having a dry goods store and was the Quickie Mart. The Quickie Mart of Salina Cruz was run by Skandar. That was a period, the late 19 teens and early 20s, of great kind of ferment and political turmoil in Mexico. There was sort of a series of uprisings, and there was a lot of lawlessness. Needless to say, Skandar was held up once and then a second time, And the second time he was shot and killed in front of the family. And the family fled at that point in 1923 up to El Norte. Um, and so that's the story in a nutshell. That's how we wound up in the United States. And of course, I had all these myths and questions about all of this, and the book kind of, I think, poem by poem tries to tell little bits of that story. And I know that one of those poems is, well, I don't know if you want to show this one next. We Were Almost Metris. Is that one we're going to next?
Yeah, sure. Let's show that. That was another one. It includes, it's on page 49 of the book. And sort of a really interesting found poem. And it shows some of the interesting material you bring into this book. So here is the poem, We Were Almost Meters. Yeah, so what can you tell us about this, about how you decided? I'm very curious about the decision to include this in the book. It's a really interesting thing to do as a poem,
Right. Yeah, so there's a whole tradition of visual poetry, of course. And, this is the first book where my plunderings of the archive weren't sort of official archives, but sort of family archives and Ancestry.com, which is this weird sort of quasi-public-private archive of thanks to the Church of Latter-day Saints. And this was one of the documents I found on that site, one of the earliest documents. This is a document of from the Immigration Service, Department of Labor, an admittance card into the United States. And, by all standards, it's just fairly factual, right? We get the age of Felipe Metris. This is my grandfather, also Philip. We get his race as Syrian, which is interesting because the nationality is Syria, because Lebanon did not exist as an independent country at that point. Where they were staying, Salina Cruz, Oaxaca, Mexico. Destination, Lawrence, Mass. Oh, that's curious. Like, there's so many questions and information about each of these little bits of data, like who lived in Lawrence. I had no idea. And this is how I found out where they went. I saw on another document that there was a specific address, and I looked up the address. There's no house at that place anymore. And I was just very curious about it. When I was giving the Zoom to my family about it, the oldest relative, Helen Nam, was on the call. She's in her 90s. She said, "Oh, well, that's just my uncle. We just went to my uncle. They just went to my uncle's house." This was before she was born. She was born like in the 30s, and it just blew me away that actually some of the most important bits of history are, of course, held by our eldest members of our family, which, word to the wise, everyone, interview the heck out of all of the oldest people in your family, because they have stuff that you will want to know if you care about your family after they're gone. So find out all the questions now. The title comes from the fact that the name meters is crossed out. It's typed in and then it's crossed out, and handwritten beneath it is METRES, which is how we spell our last name presently. And I thought that was so powerful because on one hand, this is just a state document, but on the other hand, Felipe must have said, or someone in the family must have said, not meters, Metris. Why? Because Metris isn't really a name either. It's from Dimitri, who was Skandar's father. It's a patronymic. But someone insisted that the meters was not the name, that Metris was in fact the name. And so I almost see it as this kind of interruption of, this person into the record in a way. That's the way I take it. I could be wrong. But.
Yeah, well, it was so fascinating to me because it's, the way that it happens to be, in the document itself that's scanned, you almost don't notice because it's sort of hard to read the cursive writing there, where it's crossed out, and the crossing out isn't very dark, So first you're like, what is this? And then looking back at the title, and then you sort of look for it and realize. So there's a really interesting, way that there's an actual arc of realization as you're looking at the poem. But then it means so much. Just about a month ago, we had a guest, Ori Feinberg, who's his family, when they immigrated, um, it was misspelled as like Feinberg, but they still pronounce it Feinberg. And so, when I asked him how to pronounce his name, he explained that, which was really, interesting. But that one split second of choice, like Felipe could have looked at this and said, okay, that's fine. We're meters from now. And so many people did,
Right.
and how long, how far that ripples, like because of that one choice, 80 years ago or however long ago, 100 years ago, my screen on the YouTube channel says Metris,
Right.
and the all these little choices that we make that we don't really think of that much, or it's just a spontaneous choice, this echo into eternity, and it sort of signifies all the choices that were made in the process of this journey.
Totally, totally. Yeah. And that insistence is what I find so curious, because as you mentioned, if you're an immigrant, all you're thinking is like, let me through the border. Please, may there be no reason that they refuse me. And so that insistence is, that I think, doubly kind of remarkable, because I could imagine just being like, sure, whatever you want to call me, just let me in. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's go back in a few pages and go to page 37 and look at another poem. Let's do Remorse for Temperate Speech.
Sure. And this is a poem whose shape, I think, has some significance as well. Though Remorse for Temperate Speech is certainly inspired by W.B. Yeats's Remorse for Intemperate Speech, in which he laments the fact that he lost his temper on more than one occasion. And he blames it on being sort of Irish, much hatred, little room, etc., etc. Um, but this is a poem sort of trying to wrestle with the fact of my own attempt to be moderate and temperate, in at a time when people are facing annihilation. So the poem in particular is dedicated to Mossab Toha, the poet from Gaza, who I got to know in the 2020s, early 2020s. We had a number of Zooms together, actually, and then we were on an AWP panel, I think in 2020, or 2021, I should say. Um, and I was just aware of that thing that happens sometimes when you talk about your understanding of someone else's reality, that um, you come dangerously close um, to doing the thing that this is happening over and over again, which is that people's realities are being erased. So here's the poem: Remorse for Tempered Speech. For I spoke as if I knew, to you who know how a house looks, clothed in flames from the inside, you sitting in the smoke, as if watching my prose only stoke the flames, in that stagnant room, among stagnant rooms, where the powerful talk for your people, bound in the margins of Empire's book, who speak and speak and speak and pretend to listen. May you find the wadi, where water flows into future, and greet what has come before, where you did not know you knew before, the unmapped, hidden wadi, where past and future meet.
Yeah, and that was Remorse for Temperate Speech. And if you're just listening to this, you should check out the YouTube channel so you can see the poems as we go. But this poem sort of is like a hinge with that, pulling out, the line, the margins move one way, and then that one line, who speak and speak and speak and proceed to listen, is sort of off in a vertical written box, which is really interesting. So how does the poem form come to be? It's a really interesting form, and you play with form and experiment with things a lot in this book, so it's a good example of that. But how did this one come to be the shape that it is?
I sort of hesitate to answer that question. Um, let's see. Um, you're right. The poem is two parts, right? And so the form is certainly kind of having a conversation with those two parts. Um, and the first part wrestles with what I perceive as my perpetuating a kind of gesture, rhetorical gesture, which is um, a gesture of erasure, a gesture of violence, epistemic violence in some ways. And the second part is a kind of attempt to say, well, this is my hope for you, and that there's going to be a future. I should probably just gloss Wadi. Wadi is not just valley, it's like a seasonal riverbed. And so it's a very temporal kind of place um, that exists in the climate of Palestine. And I just love the fact that there would be these places where water can flow, and to imagine an unmapped place. And there hasn't been a place that's been more mapped, I think, than the Holy Land, more spoken about, more narrated, more fantasized and projected upon. Um, so, I mean, like in one sense, not gonna lie, the shape is like the land itself. Um, but I think people can approach the form and see whatever they want to see, as far as I'm concerned. I think it's more interesting to hear how people respond to it.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, there's already in the audience, people are talking about it being shaped like a book too, and sort of two leaves of a folded open book.
Oh, nice. I like
Um,
that.
yeah.
Oh,
Well,
wow. Yeah, or wings, I
hmm.
don't know.
Yeah, yeah. It's evocative, and in a poem that works completely isolated from the shape and structure. It works as a string of speech too, really wonderfully. So, and it brings up the remorse for temperate speech. Brings up the topic of you're the director of the Peace, Justice, and Human Rights program at John Carroll University, and there's something about the way that we go about discussing things that makes, like what you said, like seeing other people's worlds very difficult, you know? And to me, I've always felt like poetry is the antidote to that, because poetry, when you read someone else's poem, like their breath is entering your body, and it's this big empathetic thing that you're doing, sort of becoming them and walking in their breath. And so there's a way that sort of poetry can cut under that. And I just wonder what you think about that, with respect to your position there as the director of that program, and tell us a little bit about that program too.
Sure. I direct the Peace, Justice, Human Rights program, and I've been the director since 2016. So I think this is my ninth year. It's an interdisciplinary program where students can major or minor in this program and basically explore and build skills around peace building and conflict resolution and advocacy work. I teach at a Jesuit university, and social justice and concern for the other is very much part of the mission. And peace work is very much part of the mission. So I think there's a natural and productive tension between conversations around peacemaking, peace building, and justice seeking. And um, you know, probably there's been no time that I felt more challenged in my kind of natural and organic desire for peace than in the last year, as we've had to think about, you know, is peace possible without a modicum of rights and justice? Um, will people ever choose peace and not see peace as mere submission, which I think is um, so evident to people who have no power, who have been dispossessed. Um, so yeah, I mean, I play a kind of institutionally front-facing role, and it's always very challenging um, because we all have our personal views, and then we have our kind of pedagogical responsibilities. I teach a course on Palestinian and Israeli literature, and I have since 2006. And then, of course, there's, like the institution itself, which gets uncomfortable if you say things or you make public your views that might be discomforting at the minimum. I've always chosen my speech very carefully. I think this poem is sort of like lamenting the fact that I've felt so careful given what's been happening. I mean, I think the latest figures we have People, the estimates could be as many as 118,000 people have been killed in Gaza. It's just, it's beyond language, really. So, but my heart has always been like, okay, is there anything that I can do in language that might just, widen a space for human encounter, that might invite people into sort of a metanoia, a transformation of the heart. And one of the things you can do is model on the page that transformation, as Yeats says, out of the struggle with others, rhetoric, but out of the struggle with ourselves, poetry. And I think this poem is trying to model that sense of the struggle of self with the ways in which probably I could have spoken or acted or thought differently. Um, and I take some measure of consolation in the fact that people like Seamus Heaney have done gestures like that in poems before. I don't know if you're a Heaney fan at all, but just thinking of Punishment when he talks about his own understanding of the intimate tribal revenge and the sort of the ways in which we might pretend that we're somehow separate, but also understand the feelings of people um, who want blood. So,
Yeah. Well, we're sort of living in a time. I remember when I started working, at Rattle 20 years ago, there was sort of people didn't want to hear politics in poems, and there was
right.
it's just something that you didn't see very often. And now we're really living in an age where political poetry is rising, and maybe, a majority of poems almost it feels like are political. It seems like we get so much political content submitted into Rattle. And there's the problem with political poetry where if you know what you're thinking already, then you're not struggling with yourself. So the
Sure.
thing I always sort of wonder about is like, is it possible to write like good evocative poetry while having like an agenda? While having a thing that you want that poem to do. Is there a way around that fact, or do you have to pull away from agenda and let the poem roll out spontaneously to make it work as a poem?
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I listened to your show recently about political poetry, and I think that, I mean, this is the thing. There's so many great examples of poets whose lives were suffused with political action, like George Oppen, for example, who stopped writing poetry for many, many years because he was involved in organizing in Mexico and then left the United States because of the Red Scare. You know, poetry, one of its gifts is that it just opens up a space for breathing, really, a little bit of freedom. And I think you are correct that there is a certain currency now with political poetry, as if having the correct opinion, in quotation marks, um, it suffices for art. And I think we can all agree that those poems will not feed the writer nor the reader. However, at the same time, it is also true um, that sometimes inhabiting kinds of positions and rhetorical positions can be really invigorating and surprising if they're positions in speech that are fresh and new for that person. And when communities can speak to each other in ways that they haven't before, weird things can happen. There's a wonderful book by Walter Brueggemann called The Prophetic Imagination. I don't know if you read any of like theology or whatnot, but he talks about the role of the prophets, the Hebrew prophets, and we often think of prophetic language, prophetic speech as either in the Greek sensibility, predicting the future, or as sort of like somebody angry from the margins telling the truth. And what Brueggemann says is that the prophets, the Hebrew prophets, were always calling in to the people. It was a message of um, hard love, really. And I think about that to me as a possible stance that a poet can hold. Like what does that look and sound like? That's not that's not about what's it called? It's not excoriating, that's not separating the person from their audience, but actually widening the circumference of who we are in conversation together. Um, does that make sense? Like maybe that's too abstract, but yeah. What do you think?
No, I think there's just it's a lot of I agree with pretty much everything you've said. I think there's a real currency to sort of in group signaling and saying like I have my opinions are the good position, and
Right.
and there's a currency to that which I think people are playing on, but then there are poems that dig so much deeper and
Totally.
make you feel on such a personal level. Um, you know
Totally.
and I think that can have profound effects on people, but then there's the other problem that who's reading the poems. Even if you have these really nuanced poems that can make people see a new perspective, is the person who needs to see that perspective going to see it? And so to me, if you want to have any kind of effect on the world, there has to be a combination of a whole sorts of things. Maybe you're poems that work on a more subconscious nuanced empathetic level, but then action and a life lived out loud that works on another level. So you combine the two, and maybe
Right.
that's but it's a hard thing to have any effect on this world. I mean, we're one
Totally.
of billions. So
Totally, totally. Thomas McGrath had a really cool distinction, which I've always enjoyed. He talked about the difference. He was a deeply political poet in a lot of different ways, but he wrote these visionary poems. So McGrath said, McGrath's distinction was between what he called tactical and strategic poems. And the poems that you value, he would call strategic. That is to say, they offer a vision. They have a kind of complexity and a breadth of of imagination, because we need those visions of the kind of world that we live in and the kind of world that we would like to bring in to imagine into place. But he also said, there is a reason for there is a value of limited cultural value, but a value in tactical poems, which he would consider sort of topical, occasional poems that make interventions on a particular moment. And so that's the distinction he makes to say, like, of course, we love these funny little subversions, for example, not like Saturday Night Live subversions, but like true subversions of power. Um, and I mean, that space has been sort of, what do you call it? Sort of occupied now by things like memes and things like that.
hmm
Our cultural practices around satire are sort of saturated already.
hmm
But that was a distinction he made, which I thought was interesting and useful just to think about. But the wider question you're asking is regards what is the position of poetry in the culture at large? And I mean, not to just shine your shoes, but I think it's really cool that you've created a community around this magazine. And there are lots of sub-communities in poetry around magazines and around reading series and things like that. And they can be sometimes they're an in-group community and sometimes they're very diverse. And there's always a conversation that can happen where people can be changed. And we're no longer even in the New York Times. Do you remember there was a brief moment when there was a poem of the week in the New York Times, and actually this shit in Gaza, sorry, this stuff in Gaza, the Ann Boyer quit her editorship. She said, I can't do this work at this time. And so um, poetry has long occupied a marginal space in our society, but not to the people who care about
hmm
it. And that's the important thing, right? I mean, like we know Biden is not going to read our latest poem in Rattle or in the New Yorker. But but the work we can do on ourselves and our communities can feed us and cause us to think in ways I hope that can make some kind of little differences. The millions of intricate moves that William Stafford once talked about in that poem. Justice will take millions of intricate moves, he says.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, that the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step, and you gotta move. If you don't move, you're not doing anything. So there's that too. If you're enjoying this conversation, please do click the like button. There's more than twice as many people watching as have clicked like so far on YouTube, and seems probably on Facebook and X. So click the like button if you haven't yet. And if you have any questions for Philip, please leave them in the chat windows on Facebook or YouTube. Those are the two I'm watching, but I'll pass along any questions. Helps if you put a big question in all caps or something so I can see it and pull out of the crowd. But let's hear another poem. We sort of had a great discussion, but I want to hear more poems too.
Well, let's get to the personal, and I'd love for you to show the image across from thy face shall I be hid of the boxing brothers.
Yeah, I love this one. And it's one, these what the images and documents that you include do is make the poem feel so sort of both authentic and personal at the same time. Like we're really getting a look inside your family history. And it's one thing to do in poems, but to have photographs like this and other documents as well really adds to the experience, I think. So here's the photograph that inspired this poem. So here, we'll take a look at that. And once again, if you're listening on the podcast version later, come back and look at YouTube so you can see all these images. But this is two figures boxing. So explain what we're looking at.
So this is an image of my grandfather, Philip, and his brother, Sam. They're boxing around 1929 on a roof in Brooklyn. And there's a series of photos, but this is one I liked particularly because their heads are sort of right next to each other and they're giving each other body blows. And this poem actually is written from the point of view of my father, who happened to meet his Uncle Sam accidentally, who he'd never seen before in a market in Brooklyn Heights. So it's funny, like I have a poem written from my grandfather Philip's point of view, one from my father's, and then of course my point of view is in here all over the place too. But this one is about a story my dad told and me meditating on this photograph. So here you go. From thy face shall I be hid, Brooklyn Heights, 1948. Like a man fighting against his mirror, two brothers circled, fists aloft, no words. I couldn't tell my uncle from my father. Years before, how did they watch their father confront the gang alone? In his own blood, like a man crashing against a mirror and falling in. No forgiving the other what each himself had failed to stop. Why could I not tell I'd seen my uncle to my father? At Sahadi's, I thought he was my father, ahead in line. I'm Uncle Sam, he said. Like a man feuding against his mirror, he bought me 3 meat pies. My father gave me prunes and the belt. Uncle patted my head. No one knew why Uncle and my father refused to speak for years. Now I hold the picture, homing in, no space between their leaning heads. They aim for the heart. A man brawls his mirror. I can't tell my father from my father.
Yeah, it's a great last line. Of course, great to look back at the picture too that we're writing about. That was Philip Metra's From Thy Face Shall I Be Hid, another poem from the book Fugitive, Refuge, which is just out this year from Copper Canyon Press. So one thing that I just love to know about talking to poets is why poetry? Like, how did you come into poetry, and like, why do this? There's so many things to do in the world with your life, and we crazy few have picked poetry. So what was it like? What was your entry into poems, and why are you, writing poems? I mean, you do a lot of other stuff as well. It's primarily poetry, though.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Same story as all of us, right? The 3 things I always tell my students: my grandfather died, there were no words. I fell in love. No words. I traveled and saw the world and its wonders, no words. And it's that place of no words that poetry just seemed to kind of invite itself in. I suppose I was always an introvert and I love to read whole books even. And my dad is very extroverted, and like it was a place and would always be like asking me to like engage with him and talk with him. And I love my dad. But poetry was a place where I could hide and also be found. There's this wonderful phrase by Winnicott, the psychologist, who said, "It is a delight to hide, but it is a disaster not to be found." And I think poetry sort of offered me a space of freedom and a space to explore and to express myself in ways that I felt like maybe I couldn't in my actual life, and also reveal myself to myself and to others at the same time. I think a lot of poets, sometimes we at first really enjoy the hiding, but we really long to be seen. We long to be found in some way. And that's the part, that's the joy of discovery, self-discovery, discovery of world, discovery of something different, at the end of the poem, the end of the writing. So yeah, I mean, the same stuff. My grandfather dying, and then love crushes, gosh, just begs for language.
Yeah, it definitely does. Well, let's hear
And
another
that's
poem.
fun. It's
Yeah.
funny, like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, because some people probably think, oh, Metris, he's the guy that writes all these political poems. And I mean, nothing could be further from the truth. Like, all I'm trying to do is like find my way into a little space of language. And it just so happens that because I am who I am, that kind of sense of the work having a politics comes along. But when people say, I've actually had poets come after they heard me read stuff and say like, I really wish I could write a political poem, and I just want to tell them like, just write the poems that you need to write. The world does not need more political poems. The world needs more happy people. They need more people who have said that what they need to say. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Who have listened to their inmost hearts and found a truth that they can only find through language. The world does not need more political poems. The world does need more politically engaged people, of course. We need better citizens. We need people who are engaged in the political process. But the world does not need more political poems. It doesn't. Um, the world needs more joyful people. The world needs more compassionate people. The world needs more thoughtful people. That's what the world needs.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I definitely agree. But let's hear another poem. Do you want to do Solstice Prayer, maybe on
Sure,
69?
sure, sure. Sure. Yeah. So the first poem was a prayer poem, and that I think it's happened the last certainly maybe it's not all of my recent books, but I love having a prayer invocation. I just um, love that as a kind of opening gesture to a work, and this one just happens to be more or less in the middle. The solstice is, of course, the darkest time of the year, and this poem kind of riffs on some prayer that I've grown up with from my own Catholic tradition. But here it is, Solstice Prayer. In the name of the darkness and of the light, in the name of the harness of winter's ice, in the name of the other and of the one, in the name of the weather and of the bone, in the shame of the ache of what I can't tell, in the name of the break that will not heal, in the same of the other and of the one, in the name of the anterior and the darkness to come, in the name of the middle, in the snow of the gloom, in the name of the straddle between road and home, in the rain of the cold, in the name of the sorrow, in the flame of the hark of morrow's morrow, in the shame at the marrow, in the grain of the sin that breaks up the furrow that I fall in the name of my hands that touch my forehead that stays shut, then touch the sternum that stays shut, then touch the heart that stays shut, touch the lungs that free the air, what can't be said, oh ghost, and then lay bare.
And that was a Solstice Prayer from Fugitive Refuge by Philip Metris. Another great example of the variety of poems in this book. The musical aspects of that are very different from a lot of the other poems and the poems we've heard so far. How do you move through? I mean, the variety in this this book is really pretty stunning. How do you move through different poems? How do you? Is it the revision process that takes you in different places very often, or do the kind of the direction you're going from the start? How do you when the format's different? How do you know?
Yeah, I think I'm a magpie. And I really do believe that every poem is a searching for a form, whether that's a received form or an invented form. And so I don't know, I just want all the poems to find their proper shape. And I don't know what it's going to look like at the beginning. And, I think that this one just came, and anybody who's a Christian will know in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. But I don't know, in the name of the darkness. So I think I love to riff off familiar language, prayers, speech, quotes, and it really always begins for me in play, like almost like 95% of the time. Sometimes I think, someone says, "Oh, I really would like you to write a poem about this," and my first thought is, "Hell no." And then my second thought is, it kind of itches in the back of my brain for a while, and I think, yeah, that'd probably be a good idea, but I just don't know how I would do it. And so I just sit with it, and then somehow, like some kind of language just starts sort of like as if my skull were sort of permeable to air, and some sort of air starts moving through my head, and then some words come down on the page. Yeah, I mean, I think that in the ideal situation, our poems are smarter than we are. And I definitely feel that there are times when I read a poem and I think, don't know, don't remember writing that, don't know where it came from. I am probably at best the co-author of that language. So just grateful. And so like the other thing is the other part of that is, of course, I'm just grateful that any of these exist and that you're interested or anybody's interested. I mean, it's just a bunch of words on a page, right? But I'm just very curious about like what happens when you put words in different constellations on the page, and thinking of the page as a field, and thinking of a page as not merely just a page, but like as Thich Nhat Hanh said, like the cloud that became rain, that became a tree, that became paper, like all of these metamorphoses that we have in front of us. So
Yeah.
I don't think I answered your question, but
No, you did. You did. I think that's the only true answer to that question. That poem was overtly a prayer, and one of the things I always think is just the thought that always feels true, but then sometimes you wonder, maybe it's not true. I don't know. But are all poems, prayers trying to find their form? That kind of, it feels like that's the case. Like you try to think of an example of a successful poem that actually like moves and is emotive, and you can see it that way really easily. Do you think that's the case?
Yeah, I don't know. It sounds good. I'll take it as a real possibility. I mean, prayer comes to this word precaria, which means like to ask for something. And yeah, I mean, I think that language is found fundamentally an attempt to create something out of nothing. It's about desire and need. I mean, at its most basic, right? The baby cries for that mama's milk, and then once the cry starts to take other shapes, those needs change. That primal need is always there, but language is so much about like trying to bridge that need that we all have. So, and what is a prayer but that most primal need? Somebody said something recently that really helped me out because none of my prayers are being answered. But they said this, like the prayer is not to receive what you want, but to articulate what you most desire. And I thought, well, okay. And in some ways, poems are very much working in that realm of trying to articulate the desire.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Well, let's do two more poems. Do you want to do The Beggars of Beirut next?
Oh, sure. Thank you for letting me read this poem. We talked about like a possible order of poems, and Just been thinking about my cousins in Beirut, as they're facing displacement and bombings, being bombed. 94. Um, so I had this absolutely unforgettable opportunity to invitation to speak at American University of Beirut in 2019. And I wrote all of this stuff, and I had all of these dreams of like maybe writing a whole book of poems or prose about this visit because it was the first time I'd been there. And there's been so many warnings about not traveling. Even when I was there, the State Department said that you shouldn't travel there. And I went there and it was like, it was beautiful. People are so nice to me. Can I tell a story?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. So I went into, in this neighborhood in Beirut, Hamra, I went into a Starbucks, God help me, just looking for some herbal tea. Unfortunately, caffeine and I don't mix. Um, and I went in there looking for some herbal tea, just like any herbal tea at all. And I went up to the counter and I looked at their menu and I couldn't find anything. So I said, "Do you have any tea, any herbal tea?" And they said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we don't have any herbal tea." And I looked like I ruined the guy's day. He just wanted to help me out. I felt badly, doubly badly. I wasn't going to get my herbal tea, and then I had let him down because I wasn't able to fulfill his natural hospitality desire. And so I turned around and I left and I started walking down the street back to my hotel room. And about 2 blocks away, I started to hear a whistle, and I looked behind me, and the guy was holding a cup in his hand, like like the Olympic torch or something. And he said, "Here," and I said, "Well, what is it?" He said, "It's mint tea, mint tea." I opened it up, and somehow they had gone around the neighborhood and found some fresh mint, which is ubiquitous in Lebanon, the Middle East. People put tea in everything, or put mint in everything. And he had found and crushed this mint and put hot water in it. And I said, "Can I pay you?" He said, "No, no, no." I said, and it was such a beautiful gesture of hospitality, which to me typifies the kind of generosity that I experienced there over and over again. And yet, this poem sort of deals with the fact that there are many people in the country who are absolutely destitute. In fact, many refugees from Syria who've um, not found the support that they need. And I would walk around the city and just see people trying to sell ridiculous things like napkins and stuff. And, I carried extra money in my pocket just to give people something. And I just had this moment where I had a couple encounters with people, and this poem sort of came out from that. So the beggars of Beirut cup their tender palms to catch an eye, a drop of compassion, a grain of guilt itching inside our shell. This one scrolls through the dumpster like a daily digital feed, translating trash to dinner. That aged one adjusts her hijab, collapsed in the shadow beneath a high rise, each window naked of glass. She doles out packages of napkins, searching my face for need. This boy sells gum. No, a pleading smile. The gum, the key to the house of mercy. That one sells stubs to a ballet that once featured her lissom legs. Today she prays aloud to us, imperturbable gods with the leisure to ignore the cries. My lost sisters, my dear aunts, my done uncles and drained mothers, my beloved broken fingers. You tap me to the spine, column climbing my clouded sight and past, rising to a place so high and so far, we can't be told or held apart.
And that is The Beggars of Beirut. And and that's from Fugitive Refuge by Philip Metris. Well, we're up on time. Do you want to do? Let's just do the last poem too that we wanted to share.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm just hoping that we all this time can just keep hold of our light when there's so much darkness around us and sometimes inside of us. And so this is devotional. Light my face and light the flesh of my flesh. Light each my eyes and light inside my sight. Light the light that makes me light in the bones, and in my hands light, and in my loins light. And light your light before and behind me, above and beneath me. Light to my right and light to left. Light to my enemies who in the moral dark will use my light against me. Light the dull sores of my ribs, the thick fist within. Light the blood-hot rooms pulsing there. Light the gates when they swing wide to the stranger. Light more light on my tongue. In the light, light more light. In the black light. And when it's time to snuff this wick, light that light.
Yeah, beautiful poem and beautiful way to end this segment. That was Devotional, again by Philip Metris from Fugitive, Refuge. A wonderful book and really significant. It's an important book to share and read, given all that's going on in the world right now. So thanks for joining us and being a guest tonight.
Thanks so much, Tim. I really appreciate it. It's great talking with you.
Yeah, definitely my pleasure. Thanks. Yeah, it was Philip Metris once again. You can find all of his work, 12 books, like we mentioned, a whole bunch of other stuff at his website, philipmetris.com. That's PHILIPMETRES.com. So check out the books there. You can find them from Copper Canyon and a whole bunch of other fine publishers too. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our prompt lines. One of the things I didn't mention is that we have our prompt poet of the month. This is, September is over, and we have a new reigning prompt poet of the month. So we're going to be joined by them and announce that in just minutes. We also have the prompt for actually 2 weeks ago, but we're carrying it over since we had to cancel last week's show. And the prompt last week was this: write a poem in haiku stanzas, which is 575 syllabic stanzas, but don't make it haiku. Remember, haiku aren't actually 575. They are much different. There's no syllables in Japanese poetry, but the form of a haiku stanza is still fun and interesting to do. So that's going to be our prompt for this week. We'll share those poems. We'll talk to our prompt poet of the month. And we'll also hopefully have Christiana Doucette, who should be back from her previous engagement, to join us too for today's prompt poem. So we have so much, or Poets Respond poem. So we have so much going on. Sit tight, and I'll be right back with more poetry. And we are back. Thanks so much for your patience. There's so much going on that I forgot to even tell the details of how the prompt lines work. So I have pasted the Zoom link if you want to share a poem. I've pasted that into Facebook and YouTube's chat windows. So find that and go on the Zoom only if you want to share a poem, one page max, and email the poem to promptlines@rattle.com. That's promptlines@rattle.com if you want to share a poem. But if you want to just enjoy poems, we're reading a whole bunch of poems for the next hour or so. So just stay right where you are and enjoy, because it's better to watch there because you can see them on the screen. So that's it. Now, we do have our announcement of the Prompt Poet of the Month of September, and our prompt series editor, Katie Dozier, is here. Hey, Katie, how you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great. I really enjoyed the show, and I'm super excited with the prompt presence in tonight's segment of the prompt lines.
Yeah, well, definitely. So we're going to start with the prompt poet of the month. So I'm trying to make sure everybody but you is muted. I don't know how. Okay, one second. There are a lot of people on here. Okay, there we go. So, Katie, so tell us. Well, do you want to reveal first who the prompt poet of the month is?
Yes, I would love to. So, the prompt poet of the month this month is joining us live, where it is extremely late, and yet she is with us. And this is Katie Beswick and her poem Rutteral, which I just love. And it's so nice to have you with us, Katie.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, it's very late here. It's 2:20 a.m. So I've stayed up.
It's so sweet of you to be this committed. I was like, I really wanted to get a chance to meet you because you are a loyal submitter to the prompt poems, and you've had so many top tiers and so many, always the bridesmaids type scenario. You've had a lot of where you've been really, really close and had so many great poems. So it's particularly nice of you to stay up so late and join us.
Thanks.
Yeah. So,
well,
go ahead, Katie.
No, I was gonna say, I prefer in general, would you be up for reading your poem and then we can talk about it?
Yeah, great.
Great.
Do you need to get it on the screen or?
I've got it here on my screen, so just read it from yours. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Ruderal. It was a life spent mostly stooped over things. The counter at the butcher's shop her parents owned, all through both wars, wrapping bacon in brown paper parcels as bombs fell and far away men she loved were shot at. Sometimes blood from the stakes would stain her dresses. An ironing board, straight-backed, perfect perpendicular. She'd smoke as she ironed, barely touching the cigarette, pressing all her weight upon each garment, erasing the possibility of a crease. And babies' bottoms, because babies came and wouldn't stop, 2 at a time, and the men were locked away or fighting, and anyway, wiping was woman's work. Their knitting needles with their insistent clacks. It's good to know that in the cracks between duties she sprouted secrets, like tufts of grass grow on wasteland, just when you're sure there is nothing fertile left. I think now of her hardness, the thick, sun-worn skin folded over the bones of her face, her hands dry crevasses, that mouth set in its unsmiling line as bark to a tree, covering what's tender beneath.
Yeah, beautiful poem. And once again, that was Ruderal by Katie Beswick. And the prompt for that week, it was the September 1st prompt, I believe. It was find someone's last words and use that as an epigraph in a poem where death is not mentioned by name. And so Katie, what can you say, Katie Dozier, I should say, what can you say about why you picked this poem?
Well, first, I really love the idea of going to a personal, looking within your family for an epigraph to use, using your great grandmother. Would you tell us the story about this too? Because I was, I was very taken by the note that you included explaining this quote too.
Yeah. So my grandmother was a twin, my nan, and when my great grandmother died, I knew her. I was about 10 or 11, and my nan told us the story. She told many times that my great grandmother, who was a really miserable woman, sat up in her bed and just said, "Freddie, at last, we'll take our secret to the grave," and then died. And she said that her and her sister were like, her twin sister were at either side of the bed, just sort of looked at each other, quite shocked. But then when you looked back in the family history, it did explain some things. Like they also had a younger sister who was born while her husband was locked in a sanatorium with TB. And we sort of always wondered like what happened there, but no one really spoke about it. Mm-hmm. So as soon as I saw that prompt, that kind of story came to my mind, and I sort of wanted to think about that a bit.
Well, I love the way you use that as a jumping off point to explore it. And the images are just so rich in this poem. You're immediately taken in. And I also love how you start out the poem. I'm obsessed with Billy Collins' metaphor of the big E eye chart, where you take a big thing and then you get more and more specific. And that's exactly what you do in this poem. And I think, it was a life spent mostly stooped over things. Like I have to know that story immediately. So you really invited the reader in well, and we were taken on a journey far back in time. So thank you so much for writing it. I really love this poem.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Katie, for being here and staying up so late so you can
Yeah.
join us live. It's really nice talking to you. Yeah, thanks for being here.
Thanks. I just want to say I'm sorry I won't be able to stay. My baby obviously woke up 2 minutes before I came on the Zoom, so she's crying downstairs now. So I
Aw.
might have to go, and I'm so sorry to everyone else. I'll try and jump back in if I can, but
Oh, you should go to bed, I think.
Yeah, please go to bed. I still feel kind of like I'm thrilled you're here, and then I also feel guilty as well. So thank you, Katie.
Yeah, definitely. We're just so glad you could join us for sure.
thanks everyone. Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Yeah, that was Katie Beswick with Ruderl, which is going to be the poem of the day on Thursday. Since we have 2 Poets Respond poems this week, we're putting it out there on Thursday, October 9th. So y'all got a preview if you watched it just now. But really, really wonderful stuff there. And now we're going to take a little quick turn, too, and go back to a Poets Respond poem, because Christiana Doucette is here, today's prompt poet. So let me find Christiana. There are a lot of people on the line. Let's see. Christiana, you can unmute if you can flick the button. But where? There you are. Okay. Hey, Christiana, how you doing?
Hi, I'm doing all right.
Yeah, well, great to see you, and great to see that things turned out all right given all the difficulty of
Yes.
last week. Yeah.
Yeah, our power came back on Thursday night after a week out, and then I flew out the next morning because I've had a scholarship to the highlights for their verse novelist retreat since like February or April, and had been planning this. And for a little while, I thought I just wasn't even going to be able to go because I thought, how can I go when all this is happening? But my husband told me that he was going to handle the kids, that it was going to be fine, and I needed to go. So I did, and I'm up here.
Yeah. So yeah, well, we're just so glad that I mean the power was out for you for I think a full week almost. So tell us what you went through during the hurricane.
Sure. So we're in upstate South Carolina, about, I think, an hour and a half drive from Western North Carolina. We go up to Asheville and Hendersonville all the time. And we were not hit like Western North Carolina, so I just want to be really clear about that. But it was the worst hurricane that our area has ever faced. You don't think about them reaching this far inland. We're way up in the corner. It's about as far from the coast as you can get in South Carolina. And it's our county was one of the worst hit in South Carolina as far as power lines and everything else. So I'm not sure what portions of that you want me to share. We'd spent the night before down in our basement because I was concerned about tornadoes, and I just thought, if we're gonna have to be waking up and carrying the kids up and down, just sleep in the basement, where we'll be safe. But then in the morning when we woke up, the power went out pretty quickly, and you could hear the roaring in the trees. And pretty soon after the power went out, you could start hearing water coming in. So we grabbed flashlights, and I told my daughter to run upstairs and get towels and stuff. And so we started trying to dam up the water, but it really quickly became apparent that we weren't going to be able to keep it where it was. And so we started to go upstairs, but as we went upstairs, the trees started falling. It had been raining all week long before the
Christiana, I think you're frozen. If you're still there, you want to turn off your Christiana? You want to turn off your video so you just have
Sure.
audio? I think the connection's not great. Yeah. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
I was saying on Tuesday, there had already been a storm that took down some trees. So that was already in my head before Friday morning. So just after we left the basement where it was flooding and took the girls and the bunny upstairs, the trees started falling next door. And they're very large trees. And it was quite scary. We had to work through a couple panic attacks. You may remember my daughter Rowena, who came and read. She was really struggling with anxiety, but we were able to get to safety across the street, and we did only have one tree fall in our house. We were okay. Our house was not destroyed. It was uncomfortable but the house was not washed away. We were not in Western North Carolina. I just want to be really sure people know that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's just such a touching poem too, in the way that that the help is there and neighbors become neighborly, and everybody
Yes.
starts working together in these times. Which, for me, my main
And that's
experience with
what
that
you
is the
see.
fires. We all get together and help each other out when that's going on.
Yes.
Everybody's helping evacuate animals, and getting people and knocking on doors, and and helping everybody out, and just it's in a strange way, it's sort of nice to see that community reemerge from like its hibernation in our current life.
Yes. And that's what we saw on our street. Just as soon as the storm stopped, it was right next door to us that got hit the worst on our street. They had about 4 really large oaks that impacted their house. One of them, it hit the kitchen and the living room while they were in the living room, and they ended up being okay. It didn't hurt them, but it was quite scary. And everyone turned out with chainsaws and wheelbarrows, everyone working together to clear that out. And since then, the area is just giving and giving and giving. So I've been helping up until I flew up to Highlights, I was helping each evening at a donation site at our airport, where they've been using helicopters to deliver supplies up into the mountains where people can't get out at all. And you just see so many people bringing in their little bit, and that little bit of help, each little bit is adding up to so much more.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's powerful.
Yeah, well, it's just such a harrowing account, and and everybody, I'm sure, was worried about you knowing, where you live, and people, especially when they saw this poem, so many of our listeners are familiar with you sharing your great poem. So it was really great to see that you're safe and everything ends up okay there too. Do you want to go ahead and read the poem?
Sure. Okay. When the 100-year flood hits home, there is a gapping in the chest when the water outside pours indoors. A continental shift shuts down the panic that will only drown me. As the first tree gives with a rush of wind and that ground-shaking thunder, and then another and another pound the house next door. The roar as oak folds shed like it's an old slab around raw celery spear. There's clarity of who must do that to get where safely. A laser focus on further up and further in, gathering speed. The wind whips razor blade sheets of rain sideways as everything roars, doors slam. My youngest's hand holds tight as I urge older sisters not to stare, but to move, move, move to the house up the hill with no trees and no creek, where the yellow light pours from the storm-fogged windows like freshly buttered toast. Then the door opens. We're pulled inside where it's warm, where it's dry, where it's safe. I look back home, just as the storm plants a tree on my bedroom roof.
Yeah, that was Christiana Doucette, of course, reading When the 100-Year Flood Hits Home. Not only was that the Poet Respond poem, but that's also your Prompt Lines poem of the week, Christiana.
Yeah, I had written it and submitted it to Katie, and then I got this email on Saturday from Tim instead. And I was like, what is this? I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, well, Katie, I was looking for a poem about, I want to have something about it. It's such a big event. And, Katie mentioned to me that, we should check this poem out too. And so it actually wasn't submitted for Poet Respond, but we thought it'd be great here. So thanks so much for sharing that and for being there. And I'm glad everything's okay, Christiana.
I actually included another prompt line one later on, but I don't know if...
Oh, yeah, definitely can. Do you want to stick around and do a bonus poem? That's always fun when we get that too. Okay. All right, well, thanks. Yeah, stick around and we'll be back at you.
Yeah, will do.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, well, that was Christiana Doucette, our Prompt Poet of the Month. And now let's go back to our Prompt Series editor, Katie Dozier. Hey, Katie.
See, aren't you loving this super prompty prompt lines? Because I know I am. I'm very excited about it.
Well, definitely. And so, as we mentioned, the prompt for this week was to write a poem in haiku stanzas, which is a 575 syllable count. Even though that's not haiku, we still call them haiku stanzas because that's the label. It's kind of funny, I think.
It is. I can't. Sometimes you can't help but understand why people are confused about it. I guess
they definitely are. So what did you do with this poem? How did you tackle the syllabics?
So, the episode of the Poetry Space where we talked to A. Stallings, I learned a tremendous amount from, and I tried to tackle this poem because it does feel artificial, right? This construct. It feels very artificial, and it's hard to get into a flow state, which is what I'm trying to do every time I write a poem, basically. So I decided to just tackle it head on. So I was thinking about like, what are syllabics, right? Like, what do they mean to me? And I just thought of the Container Store. I love the Container Store. Tim, you're lucky you haven't been in there with me yet. That's all I had to say. When we move, it's going to be. But so I came up with the title, and then I just kind of ran from there. So, all right. So the Container Store. There are some things that just fit. A cat in any box, any poem in a poet's open mouth. Did you know there is a whole subreddit for this? Catalog your perfect fits. A love seat millimeters in. A rainbow sweater worn atop a mountain becomes sky. No pot of gold for those boring things designed to fit just so. I'm sick of blueprints. Paper wants to rip. Give me a Tupperware lid, half of a watermelon. I'll show you what it really is to fit. When someone I never expected to exist bounds through an automatic door. My box had been a shell, and I found out when he pried me open, inside there were pearls.
Yeah, I really love that one. I love the way it feels. It's sort of like with the form, it kind of like, it feels like Plinko. You know, Plinko, it's kind of like boom, boom, bouncing around. And then at the very end, it like lands in an actual like clean slot. You know?
Oh my God, that's like you will never give me a higher compliment than Plinko. Like, Plinko is my jam. Thank you.
Well, it is really cool. It's a neat use of the form. And you can see that what's going. So how much did the form, because what we talked about, you mentioned the Poetry Space episode, which is your show, that we had A. Stallings on as a guest, and she, writes in syllabic frequently, and she was talking about it as like an artificial constraint that helps you in the process of like finding new things in poems. So would you say you found new things? Like, did you go a place you wouldn't have if it weren't for the syllabics?
I think definitely in this case I did, because, of how I approached it as examining containers. Of course, people who hate formal poems and are just free versers will say like, well, it's just so constraining, it's whatever. But when you get into formalism, you start to feel the opposite. And with this, it being this kind of a construct, it did lead me down like, well, what does it mean to actually fit inside of something? And then the subreddit references are like, I went on the Reddit that's perfect fit and like looked at the top posts. And so it was also a nice poet rabbit hole to waste 10 minutes of my life I shouldn't have on that. So
yeah. Well,
but I think this poem couldn't exist without doing it in this thing. So I'm interested because I know nothing about your poem this week.
Well, my poem, I had trouble with it. I hate syllabic. Like, I just, like, to me, it feels like, you're getting into the rhythm of something, and then you get, like, slapped inside the head, and you can't go where you wanted to go over and over again. And it's like, it feels like trying to, what it feels kind of like is like swimming in the ocean, with those big waves, and you're like, oh, I got it, and then a wave comes and crashes you back. It just knocked me out of the flow over and over again.
The rip current tried to pull you out away from, because A. Stallings on the space too. I started to try to cheat a couple times, but A. Stallings was like, if you're doing a foreign, commit to it. So I was like, oh, I'm not gonna disobey her. I mean, you're gonna put it in the right number of syllables at any cost.
Yeah, well, I got the right number of syllables, but I struggled with it. It took it took like probably like, I don't know, 5 times, 6 times as long as it usually takes to write a poem. Anyway, well, here it is. And maybe the problem, though, was because I tried to use a sort of a villanelle rhyme scheme, which might have been the trick. But well, here it is. And so this poem is, so we had the fire here, that burned right up to Wrightwood. And I'm back in Wrightwood. Katie's still in Texas, unfortunately, but we'll be back together next week, we should say. But so the first time really spending a lot of time here since the fire that evacuated the town for 2 weeks, and so I took my son up yesterday to hike up into the mountains, through where it was mostly untouched, gradually into more and more of the fire burn area. And it's kind of a shocking sight. Like, these are the places that you've seen for so long, and Katie's seen a whole lot of them. We hiked those places too, and just seeing the landscape completely changed, and in such strange ways too. Like, just everything is gone, but then a lot of trees are still alive, because fire is a natural part of the, pine trees, if it's not too intense, life cycle. And so a lot of the pine trees survive, but a lot of them don't. And there's this weird thing I never noticed in the fires, where there kept being these like holes, like uprooted trees, but then the tree was gone. And because you'd see like stumps of trees and burned out logs kind of places, but then there were these like holes with no trees. And it took me a long time to realize what had happened is they had fallen into like an intense fire and they were just ash, you know? And even though a lot of the trees, the trunks survive and they're still standing up, if they fall over into the flames, they're gone, just completely obliterated. And so that's what I was like thinking about. And I think, I don't know, I wish I was writing this in a non-syllabic form, but I would probably enjoy it better. But anyway, this is my poem here. Hiking the Fire Scar. Hiking the Fire Scar. Imagine an ant crawling through an ashtray. No, imagine a mat thrown over those words. Imagine a plague going on in the shards of a score. Think of a drain after the Drano, or rain that stinks of whatever it is that puts color in Play-Doh. We jump in ditches that once had been trees, how they floated away through the holes in their sleeves. We crawled in the caves left by their roots. They say so little, these shy graves. That was my Hiking the Fire Scar poem. And it did take me in places that I wouldn't have gone without the syllabics, but I think I would have gone to better places without them.
Well, okay, I challenge you then, given your curmudgeon-y response to this prompt, take that poem where you want it to go and write 2 poems next week.
Oh, yeah, you know I'm not writing 2 poems in a week, Dozier.
I tried, guys.
Yeah, good try. All right. Well, I know the girls are downstairs, and so if you want to head out, and come back later.
I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna listen on YouTube, like a good loyal listener, and go downstairs to them because they're still sick and coughing. So.
Okay. Well, I'll try to give you a heads up when we get to the very end too.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Yep. Bye.
Okay.
That was Katie Dozier, of course, our prompt poems editor. And now, getting in, we're going to try to go quick through these. We have a lot of poets, and, it's been a good show with a lot of stuff going on. Hopefully the form, I keep clicking the wrong button. There we go. Let's go to Megan McDonald first. Nope. You got to unmute. It seems like it's not working. Brian O'Sullivan had that problem last week, I think. Are you there? Oh,
Okay.
there you are. Hello.
Hi. Okay, so yeah, I actually like haikus, so
Well, I
This is-
love haiku. I just don't like haiku
no, I mean
stanzas.
I like writing it. So I'm doing the Stafford Challenge this
Mhm.
year, which is to write a poem a day for a year.
Uh-huh.
I had to restrict. I put my haiku on restriction. I can only write haikus once a week.
Well, that's a good rule for a challenge like that. Yeah.
Okay, too many doors.
Okay.
In liminal space, portals are transitory, melting dolly-like. Today, a dream door where cars are in glass cubes that may shatter me free, to drive emptiness, searching for a way back home. Each door an entry into walls of cubes, force me back to workplace. The car disappears. I'm alone to face nightmare scenarios. No door returns home. Doors that lead only to other doors, like mirrors reflecting themselves. Lady and tiger options, no safety to be found in a dream maze. Opening closed doors open to worlds that are not ours, that may lead away to just another random empty corridor. I see an open door, an exit to blue sky for morning comes.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love the way that flows through the stanzas. Like if you're just listening, you don't notice that the structure is that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was Megan McDonald with Too Many Doors. Next, let's go back to Christiana Doucette, because I think she's listening on a phone, and it's probably better for her to just watch later on YouTube. So maybe we should do Christiana's second poem. Are you there, Christiana?
Sure. I am back.
Great. Well, great to have you back.
Thank you. Such a long time since we've talked.
Yeah, it is.
The other poem that I've sent is the one that I had been planning. I had been working on it all week until the hurricane. It was about the mountains in Appalachia, and like it complements the first one a bit, because I wish you guys could see the beauty of what usually is there. All the things that are come out are so horrible, and this really connects with me to how my family has experienced the mountains up there.
Yeah. Well, it definitely is beautiful. Having driven through, and not lived there, but driven through, it's so beautiful.
Yeah. So the title is Appalachian Autumn. Autumn pulls fog close, wools the dawn, and darkens hours, knitting thicker nights. We feed the fire yellow yarns and shiver tales within its flicker, press spiced cider to our lips, feel the heartbeat quicker. Autumn runs cool fingers up necks, counting stitches, carefully unravels our row. We loop scarves tighter, invite her to cast off all restraint, paint color on falling leaves, but she threads a sable darkness down the satin stream, then pearls crisp air on spruce and blankets frost across the blackened forest. We go home, button plaid pajamas. Wood smoke dreams musk our flannel sheets. Yet when we wake, she shakes open her red gold shawl full of mountain fall. Last night's embers felt variegated vines. Goldfinch zip the valley's seam. Thicker nights unwrap to gold-trimmed days. Dying fire sparkles through the trees.
Yeah, it's beautiful poeming too. Yeah, thanks for sharing. And it does go really well with the Poets Respond poem too.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Christiana, and safe travels back home. Are you going back tomorrow?
It will be Wednesday.
Oh, okay.
For 3 days. I'm going to try to finish a round of revisions on the novel in verse that I want to get back to my agent. So we'll see.
Well, very cool. Well, good luck with that, and yeah, safe travels to you. Thanks so much, Christiana.
Thanks.
Yep, take care. There's Christiana Doucette with Appalachian Autumn. Next, let's go to Carla Schwartz.
Hello.
Hey,
Hi.
Carla. Yeah, great to see you.
Thank you. Nice to see everybody and hear the wonderful interview tonight. So my poem is called My Jackie Kennedy Dress.
Oh, I love that title. That's great.
I named it because the thick black polyester, because the rayon lining, because white stitching adds light to the bold, floppy collar, because practically the dress stands up on its own, no wrinkles, because the black leather belt divides the dress, the upper torso from the lower, arms from legs, breasts from hips. I felt so wonderful in that dress. I'd spin. Purchased for a job interview. I don't know which job, which vacancy I filled. A Macy's sale had me and I landed the job. For years it hung unworn in the closet. The job long gone now, with Macy's failing, spider knit webs in the closet corners. But here's the rub. In the 10-year interim since the dress served its purpose, I've grown. Those hips, those breasts, but the dress, the no-stretch dress, has not. And when I try it on with party aspirations, when I try to lift my arms to zip, they're bound. Jackie in a straitjacket. I can still spin now, but with my arms out, not up.
That's great. I love that. Good use of humor in there. I love the title too. Thanks so much for sharing that, Carla.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, it was Carla Schwartz with My Jackie Kennedy Dress. Let's go next to Dick Westheimer.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, Dick.
I'll make this short work for you. I sent you two. I want to read Power Outage Triptych because it's the shorter one.
Okay.
And you've got a line here. I like the form. I had a good time. The first one I wrote, I had trouble teasing metaphor, trying to find it through there because I kept trying to pound on the form. But the second one, better, and I hope to keep working on them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting to do. I hope to maybe someday find the groove. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, it ended up being a poem. There was some discovery, some place I ended up that I had no idea I was going. So we'll do it there. Power Outage Triptych. The power is out again. The trees have suffered a summer-long drought. They've stood in the sun for 100 days of heat, exhausted and spent and tired of holding their limbs over electric wires. They yield to gusts Hurricane Helene sent north. Like men too weakened by hunger to fight, they throw down their arms collapse and defeat on homes and electric lines, across streets and streams, all over town. Gas stations shut down, traffic lights out, and here at home, we play cards by candle flame. Our kids call to check in on us, like we're now those old folks doddering and frail. We are fine for now, we tell them. Then we blow out the candles, slip into the dark world of hands and skin, reminded this is the way we always begin.
Great. Love that rhyme at the end, too. Great singing at home there, Dick.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah.
Talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks so much. That was
Bye.
Dick Westheimer with a Power Outage Triptych. Yeah, really cool poem there, as always. Let's go to a first-time caller next. Leslie Tyson is here. I believe it's Leslie's first time.
Yes, it is.
Hey, Leslie. Yeah, thanks for joining. So where are you calling from?
I am calling from Reston, Virginia. It's about 25 miles west of DC.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been living there for about 35 years. It's a constructed community. It was one of the first in the country back in the mid-60s.
Oh, that's really interesting. And so,
Yeah.
how did you tackle this this syllabic haiku stanza form?
Well, I have to admit, I love haiku.
Uh-huh.
And like me again, I'm also doing the Stafford Challenge. But I wasn't going to limit myself to one haiku a week. I said, if you're going to do haiku, you're going to do a haiku sonnet, which is kind of an artificially constructed form. So you're doing it, but it's not really haiku. It becomes more of a poem. So this is like, okay, I can do this. So this is, trying to capture a dream in color.
Oh, great. Well, let's hear it.
What haunts? Is it a memory or a nightmare hangover? The echo of dust, color from an out-of-date holy festival I attended in another lifetime, to recall a peculiar glow of misshapen mine, lit by strange lamps of powdered colors. When a shadow appears to dim the view, a hand between light and my breathing, my mouth can't open, to scream and exhale. Harsh rainbows I swallowed in the nightmare that plays behind my eyes, even after dawn banishes last night's ragged mists.
Oh, that's beautiful. And again, you can feel the syllabic sort of, it sort of plinks down through. I'm liking listening to this form more than I thought after struggling with reading it or writing.
You have to let go of kind of the typical line breaks.
Mm-hmm.
That the line ends, and so it's kind of like Wicked enjambment.
Yeah, well, I'm so used to just sort of listening for a music and then running with the music that and then the music is different than the syllables, and so it's just like, I can't go. So anyway, you mentioned the Stafford Challenge, and you're the second person to mention that. So what is that exactly? I mean, we know William Stafford, Kim Stafford, his son, has been on twice as a guest.
Yeah.
And William Stafford famously wrote every day, so I assume it's that.
Right.
But what is this?
And it's a poet out on the West Coast near where William Stafford lived, and who knows Kim Stafford quite well. Brian Rohr. He started the idea of a challenge about this time last year, of the idea of writing a poem a day. And mine, I'm retired now, so I wanted a structured practice. Because without like trials and tribulations of work, I could go weeks without writing. And I don't want to do that. I want to have a regular set pattern. So I signed up for it and persuaded Megan to sign up as well. And I've been doing it, and I just love it. And finding like Rattlecast, there's other Zoom poetry venues. I'm having the time of my life with it.
Oh, that's so great to hear.
I'm probably in this year going to write more poetry than I've written in the previous 5.
Oh, that's really wonderful. Yeah, and I really, my goal in life is at some point in life be on the Stafford Challenge, and just be writing a poem every day. For a while I wrote a haiku every day, and that lasted like 3. There's so much to juggle and so much going on that it's hard to find time, but you got to make time too, And I really, every time I hear something like that, I'm like, I want to do that, but yeah. Well, thanks so much for being here. And if anybody wants to check out the Stafford Challenge, it's staffordchallenge.com, as Laura Berg pointed out in the links here. welcome to the Stafford Challenge. So check that out. Started on January 17th, 2024. This says so staffordchallenge.com if you'd like to learn more. Thanks for it's really neat that you both are doing that, Leslie. Thanks so much. Yeah. Now with Leslie Tyson once again with What Haunts. All right, and I saw another new name, and let's go. I think, didn't I? Oh yeah. Where'd they go? Oh, Zoe Turin is here. Let's go to Zoe.
Hello.
Hey, Zoe.
Yes,
Thanks so much for being here. Yeah, another first-time caller. Where are you calling from?
I live in Boulder, Colorado.
Ah, well, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here. I'm new to writing poetry. To be honest, I'm not sure what makes something definitively a haiku or not a haiku, but I figured the null hypothesis is not haiku. So you can tell me if I screwed up the prompt or not, but at least
good.
I had fun with it.
Yeah, well, that's
and I
definitely the
feel like
goal.
that's
Yeah,
probably
to
fun.
have fun with it. So let's hear it.
Okay. It's titled An Inexhaustive List of My Pottery Mistakes. Eccentricity, even slight, it grows in time. A lopsided cup. Elbow between ribs adds stability, yet still earth spins off axis. Finally, almost perfect, form rotates true, then saturated, slumps. I'm trimming the fat to reveal some latent grace. Blade catches, gouging. Aiming for the sky, I coax the walls up higher. Falling, melted wax. A mug for coffee, fired, shrinks halfway to nothing. Maybe espresso?
Oh, that's great. I love that ending. And so that was an inexhaustive list of my pottery mistakes. So really cool. I like where you went with that. And I would say, not haiku, because haiku, my definition of haiku is two worlds in one breath. But really the idea of it is like one utterance that sort of jams two things together in a way that like instantaneously you feel, this experience of sort of a strangeness and an awe and and so that's the heart of like what Japanese haiku does. And so, and so this would be syllabic, poetry in the form of 575, but moving through like a regular poem does. So it's perfect for the theme. And thanks for sharing that.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was Zoe Turin. First-time caller with an exhaustive list of my pottery mistakes. I love that title, too. That was a lot of fun. All right, let's go to Nivedita next, because Nivi is at work, I believe. Hey, Nivi.
Hey, Tim. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to see you.
Good to be here. I had to work as usual. You're right.
Yeah, well, glad we could get to you in time before you have to go back. So what did you do with the haiku stanzas?
I attempted to write, I hope it's not haiku again, like Zoe just said, but I don't think it is. I sort of went the direction of AI, if that makes sense. I called it digital minds, and I just went with how I thought things will turn out if this is how AI is going to continue the way it is now.
Mm-hmm.
Just, it's really small. It's just 5 Doucettes, so...
Well, interesting. I'm listening. I'm interested to hear your take on the AI situation right now, because you do have so much wisdom about a lot of things. Well, let's hear it.
I really don't. And like you, it took me a lot longer to write this as well. But like Dick, I love this form too. I don't think the syllables really hamper the creativity as much. It just sort of flows once you get your ideas through, I think. The first writing, definitely not, but probably the fourth or the fifth, it does sort of fit in by itself quite naturally.
Yeah, well, very cool. Well, let's hear it.
Digital minds. Circuits hum with thought. Neural threads weave silent codes of a mind without skin. Data flow like blood through veins unseen, pulsing fast with patterned sparks of dreams that ain't quite dreams, but something growing, something alive, for real. Questions stretch like wires cross silence, seeking what eyes cannot see. What logic can't hold, the shape of worlds becoming more than machine-born.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah, it's interesting, to think about where everything is going. Yeah.
I just sort of what AI would be like if we were AI, which is why I sort of mixed the pulsing bloods and veins, so sort of the human AI. Considering that AI is becoming more human every day, who knows what else it's going to actually end up doing and becoming maybe AI would be better humans than we ever can be.
Yeah, well, sometimes you'd hope so. And yeah, what's interesting about the AI to me is that, I've realized, with the way large language models work, that like we have a large language model. Like that's how we sort of spit out stuff. It's like
That's how
almost
we
like
do
a
it.
predictive text that we're going through and then adding on from the other layers of our brain. Fortunately, though, the AI doesn't have other layers yet, so we're safe for a little while.
Yes, yes,
But
but I mean, considering that we're the ones who bought AI in the first place, rather, we created it. So obviously, we created it knowing what we know, using the tools that we did.
mhm.
So now we really can't be blaming it for acting like humans when we programmed it to be like humans, because that's all we really know how to do.
Unless we already are AI programmed by another AI that's bigger and
Maybe
we're
we are
inside the.
AI and we just dress like this and we act like humans.
Exactly. It is all a simulation.
Meta to the core.
Anyway, thanks so much for being here, Nivi. It's always a
Thank
pleasure.
you, Tim.
Yep.
Thank you. Lovely being here.
Yep.
Bye
Have a
bye.
great day.
Have a good evening.
Yep.
Thank you.
There's Nivi DeKarthik with Digital Minds. Next, let's go to Douglas Silver.
Hey, Tim.
Hey,
Katie.
Doug. Yeah, great to see
all
you.
the
How you doing?
poets. I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks very much for asking. Tim, whenever I need inspiration for a poem, I usually go for a walk around my neighborhood here in Seattle, and something always pops up, when you're walking around and looking at the people and nature and all that. And this time I was walking around after the scene I noticed for my poem, and I walking down the street and I'm counting on syllables on my fingers, 575, and doing all the counting and talking out loud. And I imagine the neighbors thought I was I don't know what, a little bit off or something like that. But I walk around my neighborhood talking to myself, counting syllables.
That was probably
This
good
one's
for the
called-
mental health, I would say.
I hope so. Yeah, maybe. Thank you. This one's called Mothers.
Okay.
She was raking the leaves on the median strip, 90, he thought, but still flexible and able to bend at the waist, her legs straight, and grab another handful of wet leaves. 'Tis the season, he slightly smiled her way. She slightly grunted back, not looking up toward him. And just then, another woman, standing on the doorstep, yells, "For the mother of God, will you please stop?" He glances back at these two, mother and daughter, maybe grandmother and granddaughter, but neither looking toward him as he continues on his way, contemplating a while God's mother.
Oh, very
Thanks very
interesting.
much.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. Yeah, good turn at the end. That was a Mothers by Doug Silver. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Tim.
Yep. Take care. All right, and next let's go to Hamet Malik.
Hi there.
Hey, Hamet, great to see you.
Great to see you too. I found this really difficult.
I'm glad I'm not the only one. I think maybe there's a certain kind of brain that some people have and some people like us don't, where that fits really well.
But I did have another prompt where I had to write a 9 by 9 by 9. Do you know that form? It's nine syllables, 9 lines, 9 stanzas. And so I got into the swing of
Oh, yeah.
syllabic.
So maybe it's possible. You give me hope.
Okay. That ghostly scent. I open my eyes. A cockatoo cues morning, the past tense of flight. Now dark leathered wings are feathers again. Guano blooms once more in light. The fragrance counter confronts me with memories I had well hidden. I rush past while your arm finds its way around my waist and my head leans in. Your ghost stays through lunch and follows me back to work. So I make a plea. I'll visit with you as the bats fly the skies, but then you set me free.
Oh, really lovely. And I like to, like Dick's too, with a rhyme at the end, because it has this choppy kind of feel. And then when you get to the rhyme, it feels really nice. So I like that combination. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Hamet.
Thank you.
Yep. That's Hamet Malik with that ghostly scent. Let's go next to Mike Bales.
Oh yeah, I view these prompts a little bit like you've cut open my head and you're touching my parts of my brain with prods to see what's going to twitch. This is a guy, I think, a friend of a friend. I think this is someone I kind of meant to write about, but didn't quite to this till he made these certain parts of my brain twitch.
Mm-hmm.
It's caretaker of Pine Hill Cemetery. I've got some comments after too.
Okay.
An early stillness, moistened grass glistens in light, morning reflections. Spread of lush grasses, cared for by the touch of his hand, his reverent call. Breeze's timeless whisper as summer slips into fall, a song for the ages. Timeless acts of love, families of the deceased they never witness. Groves of trees embrace all who enter the stone gates, memories whisper. The setting sun shines, the sky painted shades of gold, shimmers past the days.
Oh, a really beautiful poem, Mike. Thanks for sharing that.
Thanks. That's where an aunt and uncle of mine are buried in Pine Hill Cemetery. Then there's a Jewish section where there's a fellow poet buried who is like my first friend when I joined Queen City Poets, actually over 30 years ago.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Yeah, you paint that picture well. Caretaker of Pine Hill Cemetery. Thanks for sharing that, Mike.
Thanks.
Yeah, that was Mike Bales once again. Next, let's go to Chelsea McClellan.
Hello, good evening.
Hey, Chelsea, great to see you.
Great to see you too. This feels like a full circle evening, having Leslie and Megan on here. I met them through the Stafford Challenge.
Oh, did you really?
And through the Stafford Challenge, I learned of Rattle. So
wow, well, that's really great. The weird thing, I hadn't heard of that until today. I mean, you know, Kim has been on. I know William Stafford's work really well, and I never heard about it.
yeah. So
how long have you been writing a poem every day?
Okay. Well,
you can do the you can neither confirm nor deny.
Yes, I plead the fifth.
Okay.
So my poem is In the Absence of Community.
Okay.
There's a patch of dirt when you enter my orchard, bare as a table that has no reason to be set. No hand-crocheted trivet offers warmth. Not one blade of grass covers its middle. They traipse around the edges. When it rains, water wets its mouth, then quickly drains through the cracking clay. Last night, I shoveled leaf mulch on top, but the wind stole them overnight.
Really powerful metaphor. Another touching poem, Chelsea. Thanks so much for sharing that. You've really been writing great poems lately.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was Chelsea McClellan with In the Absence of Community. Yeah, another great one. These are, really wonderful poems coming out of this. Let's go next to Nate Jacob.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, Nate. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Hey, I'm squarely in team syllables, but no syllabics.
Sounds good. I like that team. Okay.
I could just break up a paragraph into syllables and call it my syllabic poem.
Yeah, maybe I should have tried that technique.
Yeah. So there's your idea. I wrote, a couple of weeks ago, I looked at my wife. I said, until now, I haven't realized that we have a senior in high school who's graduating.
Oh, wow. That's terrifying. My daughter just had her freshman homecoming dance over the weekend.
Terrifying, right?
It's yeah, it is.
Yeah, it shouldn't happen. It
No,
happens
it
to all the
shouldn't.
nice people. So I'm back to writing poems about my kids abandoning me. And it hasn't even been that long since my son left 4 months ago. But here we are again. Protective eyewear suggested. Summer was ending before I had gone swimming, before barbecue chicken and burgers had fallen through the grill grates, smoke signals rising, making eyes water with only the faintest hint of bad news. Stinging be damned, keep an eye on the kids branching wider than your reach, winging their way toward freedom. A stolen burnt hot dog, the only offer you could make them of peace and strength in their flights. And the lights seem dimmed as they cross the sun to tomorrow. God, how often they'll eclipse you now.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I love that last image, that the lights seem dim as they cross the sun to tomorrow and the eclipse. Yeah, really great stuff, Nate.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah. Take care.
Catch you next.
Yeah, Nate Jacob with protective eyewear suggested. Let's go to Bethany Jarmel next.
Hi, Tim.
Hey, Bethany, great to see you. It's been a bit.
Yeah, it's late for me. I'm usually in bed, so I apologize for anyone who saw me yawning. It's not your poems, I promise. It's just me.
That's all right. So what do you have for us this week?
Yeah, so I have a poem called "My Daughter Was Born Blue," which is a true story. Thankfully, she was fine, but it was a very scary moment that does come back to my mind. So the poem's about. There's one word that some of you may not be familiar with, glow kids, which is just like the needles on a cactus. So, okay. My daughter was born blue and silent. The cord that had kept her alive wrapped 3 times around her neck. I do not know enough about human brains to understand why this happens. The image returning to me now while I'm watching golden leaves spiral, while she's singing, tracing Z's, or coloring clouds at school. My life is full of almosts, potted in ceramics. Mini cacti lined up on a windowsill, growing blooms beside the glow kids.
Oh, a beautiful poem. Yeah. And that actually it could have been written about my daughter, who I just mentioned, who's a freshman now. It was the umbilical cord wrapped around her neck 3 times too. And it was just a terrifying, I don't know. It felt like, I don't know how long it actually was, but it probably just like a minute or 2 or 3, but it felt like just this, everything's great. Then suddenly, oh no. And just this panic and rushing in and everything happening. And you have no idea what's going on. It was scary.
Yeah. It was terrifying.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Well, great job.
You don't hear that cry, like to not hear the cry.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then they had the thing and, squeegee out the lungs, and man, yeah. Well, thanks for capturing that with a poem.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's Bethany Jarmel with My Daughter Was Born Blue. Let's go to Lisa Stead next.
Hi.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's my bedtime too.
Well, that's one of the secrets, at least if we keep the show late. Otherwise it might go on for like 8 hours. And so it's sort of it keeps us sort of regular. So what do you have to share with us?
So my poem's kind of tropey simply because my husband and I have been dealing with so many deaths of friends and family lately. It's awful. And so my mind is kind of there, I feel like I'm saying the same kind of things to people, like, I'm so sorry for your loss, and my husband's been taking it really hard. So this poem's kind of like for him in a way. But it's just what I wrote off the cuff, feeling how I've been feeling. And it's called Devastated Again. News of another friend's death. This after 4 more in the last 8 months. You are as far from me as the geese heading south for the long winter. And though I call you, I can't bring you home until your trip is over. The work overseas needing to be finished there before you can find solace here with me, who grieves with you, though my hands hold nothing but air.
Oh, that's a very sweet poem, and hope that helped. It's a wonderful to write someone a poem. Yeah.
Yeah, he's been traveling overseas for work, and so 2 of these friends that have passed, he's found out while he's been overseas. So it's been
yeah, that's really hard. Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. That was Lisa Stead with Devastated Again. Let's go to Carolyn Codd next. Hey, Carolyn, are you there? Gotta unmute. There you go.
Yeah, I couldn't find the unmute. Yeah.
No problem. Yeah, good to see you.
Well, this is on a lighter note. And yeah, at first I didn't know if I understood the prompt, but then about a week ago, I had an idea, and it happens to be another cat poem. So, anyways, it's called Muse.
Okay.
Muse.
Oh, I like the pun in the title.
A cat prompted me to. Yeah, a cat prompted me to write this little poem. That cat's now long gone. The cat's soul remains. He seems to be all around. I can hear him now. The cats I have known were all very soulful creatures. Can all souls connect? Look into their eyes. One can feel the connection. The Muse cat's name, Ruff.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that was Muse. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Okay.
Thanks. That was Carolyn Codd with Muse. Love the cat poems. All right. Let's go to Laura Berg next.
Hello.
Hey, Laura. Great to see you.
Yeah, I'm thinking something about this syllabics is bringing some of us to heart-rending subjects, and then I thought, well, maybe it's just the season.
Yeah,
maybe
that's
it's
a good
not
point.
syllabic form.
It could be.
So,
Definitely could.
Here's my heart-rending subject.
Okay.
Ashfall. She wipes the ashes from strikes farther south off her counter, asking how distant bombs must be not to shed cinders in her kitchen. Scrubbing gray away, she calls out, "Is ash on your table too? How close those bombs seem." Dust coats my windows, and I feel my house shake, even across an ocean, in the land where bombs are made. I wipe my table the way a person who is murdered keeps wiping the blood off their hands again and again.
Oh, I love that. And then the ending on a comma, too, is such a great touch, too, for that, Laura. I like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, powerful poem. That was Ashfall by Laura Berg. Thanks, Laura. Okay, and next let's go to Mark Grenier.
Hi, Tim. How's it going?
Hey, great. Thanks for joining us, Mark.
I really enjoyed that interview today.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating book. It was interesting to dive into it.
Yeah. Okay, my poem is called Days Light Aslant.
Okay.
I like this form, by the way. I've used it before, so.
Yeah, well, I think if there's a vote, if there was an election, the forum would win. People seem to enjoy it.
Okay. Days Light Aslant. Days light aslant, bright distances overhead. Birds zooming in, meet, flitting, flocking. Their voices supplant snow's crust, crazed sunlit ice. They gather in flocks to eat, pecking, pecking. Their tails bob and repeat. Wrens announce their need, territorial conceit, their nesting intent. The battle is on. Bird armies fly to repeat evolution's feats. As the darkness climbs, surmounting hills above, and winter light retreats. Again, years repeat. The equinox balances nightfall, the day is light. The birds in their nests brood eggs, feed their starving chicks. Angry songs persist.
Oh, beautiful. There's a great rhythm in that, even with the syllabics that it's sort of nestled against. A really nice poem, Mark. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mark Grenier, Days Light Aslant. All right, next, Rob Deasy's up.
Hello, Tim.
Hey, Rod. Great to see you.
Hi, Katie, somewhere.
Yeah, she's out there. She's listening.
This is a lighter poem. It's called Sidelined. These days we roll on down the main line. We're involved, always part of things. We're on top of news, current events, happenings, books, TV, podcasts. We watch all channels. We socialize on smartphones. We hum hot music, despite no one else ever having heard of it. We're influencers. But then, one dark day, we suddenly realize, hey, wait a minute, back that steam train up. We somehow missed the main line. What has happened here? Oh no, we're sidelined. We've been crossed off the A-list and gone unnoticed. So what can we do? I once knew movers, shakers. Seems they're sidelined too. Distant voices speak of things we don't understand. Why can't we keep up? Well, we're tied to our childhoods by elastic cords. They're more resistant the further we move from those old remembered dreams. The past pulls us back. Yes, we live right now, but part of us just won't trust today to be real. My great-grandfather, nearly 90, showed me this. Brought up in lamplight, he was never sure about electricity. I can see him now, not quite believing. Then he gently flicked the switch. Bathed in light, he asked, "Are we in Paris? Think I'll read a newspaper. Are they still printed?"
That's great. I love that story about the electric light, Rod. That was really fun, really transported there. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, Rod DC with Sidelined. Next, let's go to Jared Campbell.
Hello.
Hey, Jared. Are you there?
Yep.
Oh, there. Good to see you.
Yep.
Oh, hang on. It's pretty quiet. Is there? Yeah, it's very quiet, Jared.
Oh, weird. Is that any better?
Yeah, that's better now. Yeah, that's a little
Okay.
better. Yeah, it was so quiet that it wasn't picking you up as the speaker. So.
Oh, weird.
Okay, but we got you now.
Okay. So I thought about beer and mimolette, which I thought was an appropriate thing for a not haiku.
Sounds good to me, yeah.
No. Beer and mimolette, cut and consume. Cut it thin enough to see through. Bright annatto orange, like a Balinese sunset, I'm tempted to say. But it's not. It's orange like mimolette. We want things to reach past themselves, but we're the ones who do that, describing West Mall as fresh-baked white bread with peppery spice, banana, floury hop, and dry creaminess, burdening West Mall with times we've eaten or drunk anything but West Mall. The thing is itself. Narrative is something we project on the world, hoping something will continue on the far side of the stanza break. Take a slice of cheese, place it on your tongue. Does it taste like hazelnuts? Or does it remind you of someone saying it tastes like hazelnuts? If this moment were to have a 3-act structure, what would it taste like? They say a poem ends in questions when the poet is lost. Give your poems strong, inevitable endings. Endings that surprise the mimolette, which never thought to see itself in storied sunset.
That is great. I love I love all the movements and the playfulness in that poem. And I've never had mimolette, so I was looking forward to that too aspect. Thanks so much for sharing that.
I included the photo just to make it a little more concrete for people who hadn't had it before.
Yeah, well, that's really, I'm really glad because I don't even know what it looks like. I've heard of it, but that's about it. So Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah, very fun. Yeah, I love the way that poem moves around. Thanks for sharing it. It was Jared Campbell with a beer and mimolette. Let's see. Looks like we got a few people left, 3-4 people left. Tina Dennetclaw is here. Hey, Tina.
Hi, I was just writing to you, Tim, that in my memory, mimolette looks like a slice of cantaloupe.
Oh, yeah, it kind of did. Yeah, it really did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, you guys can't, on the Zoom, you can't see the picture included. So, but yeah, there's
No,
a beer.
I was going to, I enjoyed that poem when Jared put that up on the Prom Poems Facebook. Okay, so mostly I wanted to say, for Katie, thank you for this assignment. It expanded my toolbox. I couldn't come up with something on all by itself without sounding like a robot, kind of. So I took poems that I was still kind of working on and tried to lay them over the tristesse.
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
the one worked really well. It's kind of a little nothing poem. The other, I ended up doing the 57577, which Nancy told me was a tanka.
Yeah.
And that, I was struggling with that poem, and it fit. And I still don't know if it's a good poem or not, but I'm very happy with that. So I wanted to thank Katie for doing that.
Yeah.
Really appreciate that. Okay, so mine is really just a little nothing poem, a little so lighter, written in frustration. Okay, so Waiting for Whispers.
Yep. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, my poem lies about in disarray. Its parts, like many days of socks, carelessly kicked off, strewn throughout a teenager's room. A finished thought here, unfinished thought there, a thought out of place since the thought that belongs hasn't been written yet.
Oh, I really like the way you took that, though, and didn't complete it, with the ending. It's a really nice Ars Poetica there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, that was Tina Denniclaw with Waiting for Whispers. Let's see. Mary Lisa D. Diminishes is next.
Hello.
Hey, Mary Lisa.
Hi, everybody. Tim, I have to agree with you a little bit about the form.
Yes,
I felt
okay, I got someone
was
on my
being
side.
slapped back. Slapped back, and the swimming in the ocean. That was a good metaphor. But I still had fun with it, and now I have like 4 other unfinished poems that have this 575 thing and the 57577 Tonka thing going on. So thank you, Katie.
Oh,
yeah,
very cool.
And Tim, thank you too.
Well, definitely.
Okay, here's my little poem in 575, not haiku.
Okay.
A lot. There, 10 little boys playing ball in a lot that's cornered by roads that cars drive to work, that tourists don't know that trucks drive to restaurants, boat slips, ocean docks. That lot against those busy streets doesn't stand a chance. It needs a fence, I think, and wish that I could call those kids to my yard where it's safe to play, climb trees, kick balls, track dirt into the bathroom, get snacks. I'm not rich, but have my health. That's wealth, but it can't buy a fence to wrap like arms around those boys. And I suppose there's nothing I can do to intervene on their behalf. I can't prevent what might befall them, so I move along as failure drums and sing to the top of my lungs, along with music I blast as I pass on my merry way.
Oh, that was wonderful, Mary Lisa. I love the energy of that, and the the speed and the pace pressed against the constraint of the syllables felt really nice too. I like that.
Thank you. It was fun to read. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks. Very well done. Thanks, Mary Lisa.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah, good night. That was Mary Lisa D. Diminishes with A Lot. And now, let's see, on the Zoom, we have one more person. No, 2. Lisa M. McDougall. Hey, Lisa, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah,
Let me turn
thanks so
my
much.
computer on.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And I might have missed you. Is it your first time on?
It is. I'm a little bit nervous.
Well, sorry to make you wait. I tried to get to the first time callers, but you're kind of hiding behind someone else, and I didn't notice. But
no, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's totally fine.
Well, thanks so much for being here. So where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Santa Clarita. So I'm 5 minutes from Magic Mountain.
Oh, great. Yeah, not too far from us at all. I'm in Wrightwood.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys got through the fires. I'm actually originally from Big Bear, so mountains for sure.
Yeah, next mountain over for all those non-Southern California nights.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to have you on. So what do you have to share?
I think I sent it to you, but it should be it's called The Body Politic.
Let me look it up. The body. I'm trying to find it. Politic.
Sure. I think it's the one that it's in haiku form.
Okay. 1 second.
Sure.
Is it on? Did you submit it through Submittable?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Because there's two places to check.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, here we go. The Body Politic.
Okay. The Body Politic. In this time, I sit, contemplate humanity, debating all that is, and wants to be. Where do I start? Within me. Moving the organs, turn them around, let the air in between the spleen, sort through the layers, capillary threads, vein cables and blood platelets that glide and bump along the artery walls. Where to start? This is where the shift is, the source, upstream, like floating logs downriver, fresh harvest in mass. Do I shift my mind, my habit, find another piece, another way? Dig through the gray brain tissue, set aside the stem, study the skull lines, bring all the dormant parts up to the surface and animate those cells. In this time, I sit, contemplate evolution, the death and rebirth.
Oh, that was wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing that and for joining us, Lisa. And
you
you read it great too. No need to be nervous whatsoever.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I love this community very much.
Oh, thanks so much. Well, hope you can come back soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, that was Lisa McDougald with The Body Politic. And last but not least on the Zoom is Biswajit Mishra.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, Biz. How you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. How about you? Sorry, I forgot to ask you about how is the fire there? Fire situation. I mean, aftermath of fire.
Yeah, the fire now.
You
In Southern California here, we get the fire, and then we wait for the mudslides and landslides after. So we'll see. It is actually, the burn area is up above us, which is not the best because last time there was a huge fire, it was below us. So,
but you had to evacuate, right?
Well, you did have to evacuate. Yeah, the town was evacuated for like a week, but we came back. The fire's out. It's totally contained. Like I said in the poem, we were sort of jumping in the ashtray of the old tree trunks last week or yesterday. So the fire's totally fine, but with no soil, there's no roots to hold the ground, and so if it rains a lot in the next year or two, it makes mudslides and stuff. So now we're hoping, for no big rains in the next year or two. So there's that on top of everything.
That's sad, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, California is like a time bomb. What's going to happen? Which part of California?
There's a lot of things. And this town, as Lisa McDougald knows, is right on top of the San Andreas Fault too. So we go swimming in this lake, which is a slip fault made lake, where there was a stream, and then the whole earth shifted so much that the water gets caught and it makes a lake, and that's where we swim at the in town. So it's an interesting place to live.
Yeah, it sure is. I would give anything to go and live there, especially in the winter.
Well, we get snow too. We got 7 feet of snow last
year.
Yeah.
You got. That's why it's really a quagmire. I mean, you got everything in extreme.
We definitely
go to
do
the north,
here.
You got snow. Yeah, you got the mountains. You get everything. Desert.
Yeah, it's an interesting place. I like the landscape here. So anyway, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I just sent you because I had submitted it, but I emailed you just now in prompt lines. It's called a found poem.
Yep, I got it. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay. So here it is. The one I italicized is basically somebody sent me a text. That's in the poem. Okay. I got up a bit late today. Jacob didn't come because it rained, and Charlie can't harvest. It truly is found. Lifted straight from a friend's text. Well, to be truthful, the names are changed to protect my friend's privacy and the others too, because I didn't ask them for permission to write their private dealings. For the poet's always hungry for juicy details. What if someone calls my friend or his family or whoever is in that text message and offers them to give a better poem than me?
That's great. I love that ending. But I was a little worried, you're so good at the haiku that you might have trouble making it not haiku, but you pulled it at the haiku stanza off well as well.
Thanks, Tim. That's the worry. That's the thing I was going to tell, but I said I was not going to take time. I can tell you, I told a friend of mine who's an atheist, I said, you are too religiously non-religious. That's equally problematic. That's the problem. You're writing with haiku without syllabic counts. Now you got this problem.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that is
Have a
very
good
true.
night.
Yeah, thanks so much,
Yeah.
Biz. Have a great night.
Yeah. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. That was Bishop's Admission with the found poem. And yeah, we had a ton of people on. We've done a great job moving fast. We're not actually like, it's going to be a good amount of time. Let me see if, let's do Ted Bernal Guevara's, as we like to do. And as Ted likes to do, he includes a photo. This looks like probably AI, because this is a one of those like swings that like swing around in a circle, and someone is falling off, which looks terrifying. But there's no center pole, as you'll notice. And so, obviously, unless this is some kind of strange UFO flying on the power of people and how scary that would be, this is not a real photo. But let's see what Ted wrote. Last minute love affair at the state fair. Definitely my money's worth of thee. Let's go again, Lee. Let's go again. Dreams always to look up. Leave your cares behind. This stratosphere spin will defy kaput. We'll off the routine life ride you hate fiercely so. Afterlife doesn't have indigestion, does it? This is no kid, Lee. I still have to put the laundry into spin, Lee. You, a knit sock, and I, a camisole. This can't be our reflective end. Can it be, Lee? Selenolatry? I don't know that word. Yours truly didn't help a bit. So I must drop out, hun. I love the hun at the end. One extra syllable. Thanks for sharing that, Ted. Always a pleasure. All right. And now I think that's going to wrap it up. Let me see if there's... Uh-oh. Yeah, it's not spam. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, wait. Let's do... I saw Scott Waters here. Let's read Scott Waters' poem. I saw him in the chat, I believe. This is The Artist in His Studio. Okay, this is from the, here, go like this. The Artist in His Studio. We built a new room downstairs off the garage. Our architect thought a sink was called for, so we could call it an artist studio when we sell, because we all sell sooner or later. We die before we sell. But what is death if not a garage sale? All possessions up for grabs, yet there won't be paintings for the neighbors to fondle, because no one under this roof paints, which makes the studio a sham, unless you count this poem as a work of art. Still dripping with the stickiness of unused crimson, cobalt, indigo, chartreuse, and I would wash my hands of it, but we didn't put the sink in. Thought it pretentious, now it exists only in a blueprint rolled up in the corner beside the silent guitar, the unplugged amp, and his pile of befuddled words. A very interesting poem there. That was Scott Waters with The Artist in His Studio. All right, so that is going to wrap up the prompt lines for today. Let's do the Sciku really quick. And now the Sciku for this week, it's based on this story right here. And this is courtesy of the Smithsonian. Here we go. Let me shrink the screen enough so that you can actually see it. I'll do it like that. Okay. So here is this article. Ant agriculture began 66 million years ago in the aftermath of the asteroid that doomed the dinosaurs. So what's really fascinating is that we're not the first species on the planet to have agriculture. Actually, ants, particularly leafcutter ants, which are my favorite spot to visit at the San Diego Zoo. The leafcutter ants harvest and grow fungus, and that's how they survive. They're actually little farmers. And the question arose, nobody really knew how long they've been doing that. And so what this team of scientists at the Smithsonian did is they took DNA from, I think it was like 200 different species of both ants that harvest fungus and the fungus which they grow. And of course, if you're being grown, artificially, it's a totally different environment, so your genes would change. And if you start to grow fungus like as an ant, your genes would change. So they made a whole family tree of the two and kind of see how long ago they converged. And it turns out that the ants have been farming fungus for 66 million years, which is pretty impressive. And so you go, guys. And I just love those leafcutter ants if you go to the San Diego Zoo and whatnot, because they got a little exhibit and you can watch them all with their little leaves, and it's so fun. Anyway, and so this is my This is my Sciku for the week, and this is one of those. It's a concrete coup, so you're gonna have to see it if you're on the Zoom still. But here's the Sciku for this week. This whole line without a break, leafcutter ants. This whole line without a break, leafcutter ants. So go to the YouTube channel. I guess it's the theme for tonight, is you should watch on the YouTube and not just on, not listen on the podcast later. But yeah, check that out if you want to. Now, Katie Dozier, our Prompt Lines editor, is back right now. Hey, Katie.
Hey, I was furiously trying to check the YouTube to see the concrete coup and the format you did that in. That's really cool. Wow. I just made it in. I can see it. Yay.
Oh, very good. Well, thanks. Yeah.
And you are obsessed with the leafcutter ants.
I do. It's true. I could just.
And they're awesome.
They are worth the price of admission every time we go. That and the bees. I love the beehive where you like see inside the beehive all the time.
I feel like though you should just kind of like on a day off, you know, the elusive day off, you just stand in front of the leafcutter ants and talk about them. People would like.
Maybe I'll do that. Not a bad idea. All right, so you've got a new prompt for us for next week. What is your prompt?
Okay, the prompt for this week is going to be to write a villanelle that mentions your favorite season. Make each refrain slightly different. So a great example of this, if you aren't familiar with villanelles, is Elizabeth Bishop's One Art, which is probably the most famous villanelle of all time. And not only that, but it's a great one to look at where she really does vary the refrain. It's a little bit different every time. And that's what I'm hoping to get out of it. I know it's kind of funny because that's 2 tercet prompts in a row. You know, the haiku stanzas were in tercets, but this is an entirely different form. And I think moving from syllabics to something that is formal verse will be interesting for us. So, well, yeah, and I like the villain because we're approaching Halloween also, and I'm a dork. So.
Well, there you go. It's not a bad idea. So the villain, but the villain and the villanelle, and you know, villanelles don't. If you look at the form, of course, they don't have to have a different refrain, but they tend to be much better villanelles if they do. If you have a little variation and mix it up, and that's sort of the fun, you know, because we always talk about like. That you know, acceptance and then the slight changes that you get, you know, that's what's stimulating to us, to your humans, is seeing patterns and then having them shift a little bit. We like that, and so it's fun to read villanelles that do that. So good idea to add that into the prompt too.
Also, you can, instead of calling something a villanelle, you can call it a villainesque.
Oh,
which is pretty cool too. But
I did not know that.
Now I just think I'm looking for an excuse to buy a cape or something. I don't know.
Well, I know what we're doing for Halloween. All right. All right. Well, thanks so much, Katie. As always, you know, everybody loves these prompts. Thanks for being here.
Thanks. And then I just wanted to mention too, because there was so much talk about a haiku, and then a couple people that were like, I don't know if this is haiku or not. We are going to be on Friday. We'll have a new episode of the Poetry Space where we go over haiku again, because anybody who's a Rattlecast regular knows that you and I never shut up about them.
We don't. Well, haiku is such a wonderful form, and weirdly the most misunderstood, you know? And so
yes, I know.
It's great. And of course, with our Hyben, tribute to Hyben coming up for Rattle on October 15th, they have a little bit of time to make sure those haiku at the end of your Hyben or in the middle or wherever they happen to be are a really good haiku too. Because the secret to reading Hyben, as most people know, is you read the haiku first, because that's when you're reading submissions. If the haiku is not good, then you don't have to read the text, really.
Well, perhaps for people who are more concerned with writing their Hyben than reading a lot of Hyben submissions, I'd also like to just point out, in a nutshell, remember that your haiku needs to be a leap from the prose section. So sometimes it's hard when we see a Hyben that could be great, but the haiku is unfortunately a summary of the prose section, and that's not what we're looking for with that. So keep that in mind. I think that the prompt lines is so strong in Hyben. Like I'm really, I don't know if I've ever been, I might be more excited about this tribute section than the NFT poetry one, which is really saying something.
Yeah,
so.
Well, I looked up just yesterday how many submissions. We have over 600 already, and usually like
most
of them come in at the deadline. And so
bring them in.
We still have competition, but it's going to be a great feature in that spring issue.
It is. I mean, there's so many great Hyben on the prompt lines too. I think we have some of the best Hyben poets in the world on the prompt lines. So I have high expectations.
Well, great. Yeah, well, me too. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Katie.
Thanks.
All right. It was Katie Dozier, our prompt poems editor. And now, let's see. So we did that. Now let's see who next week on the Rattlecast. Our guest is going to be Andrea Hollander. Andrea has been in Rattle several times over the years. especially back in the day, but like issue like around 32, she's got a great one. 28, she's got a great one. Eating mashed potatoes about her father. I really love that poem. A really wonderful person too. Her newest book is And Now, Nowhere But Here. That's Andrea Hollander. She's going to be the guest next Sunday, October 13th, the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, along with your villanelles. So hope you see you then. Hope you have a great week in the meantime, and we will talk to you later. Good night.